Prevent as well. In fact, we're going to be doing a dive in, because a lot of people mention Prevent, but what is it there for? What does it cost us? Why is it there?
Hard to
what
get
does
into.
it do? Yeah, £49 billion a year.
Is that what it costs?
Yeah.
49 billion?
Yeah.
My God.
I know, shocking, isn't it?
That is...
interesting figures. So, yeah, we're looking at Prevent, why we've got it, what does it do, how does it do it. And then later on, it's really interesting to me that Keir Starmer was saying that this was a contempt of court issue. You are allowed to report on what somebody's charged
He's lying,
with.
he's lying, that's a lie.
Yeah.
Listen, I've got to go. Stick with Petrie. I'll be back tomorrow at 7 p.m. You better be there.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good evening to you. This is Petrie with you for the next 3 hours. And coming up at midnight, I really want to talk to you about this, because I'm a little bit confused actually by what Keir Starmer said this morning, and more than just he couldn't tell us, you know, what was going on with this murderer because of contempt of court issues. I'm actually really confused about that. But also he said terrorism has changed, and that now we are confronting with lonely, abandoned, misjudged, vulnerable young men in their bedrooms that are being radicalised. Well, that's not new. I mean, that is definitely not new. And I don't know why he's saying that it has changed to become that. I don't know, almost to say, well, we couldn't possibly have known. Well, we know that they did know there was something off with this young man, this murderer. They knew something was off with him. He was referred 3 times to Prevent, and Prevent, and in most cases, it's so interesting, Prevent, because it is a pre-crime agency, right? That's what it is. It is what they're meant to do is find people before they commit their crime, before they commit their act of aggression, terrorism, whatever it might be. But I happen to know with Prevent that they are deeply now so concerned with being called racist that they're actually not functioning in a way that they should be functioning, and they should be looking for terrorists wherever they are. No fear or favour, of course. There are plenty of far-right terrorists. That is a growing bunch of people, again, usually young men. But I'd like to know if you've ever had any dealings with Prevent, because Amnesty International thinks that it is against our human rights to have this pre-crime agency in the first place. It costs a heck of a lot of money. The budget is around 49 billion to run this agency, or multiple agencies. And I just wonder what you think about this. If you had suspicions about somebody, would you report them? And they're saying, look, a lot of it's overwhelmingly young Muslims that are reported to Prevent, and that displays racist tendencies. That there's a suspicion. You have a suspicion. You're naturally more suspicious of these people. So how can it possibly work? Well, we're going to look into seeing what Prevent is and have a chat about what it's supposed to do in just a moment. But I'd be really interested as to what you make of this, and what actually as a nation we can do about this sort of crime that we're talking about here. This isn't being called terrorism. He did agree to terrorist-like charges. He did plead guilty to those. But the act of killing those little girls is not being described as a terrorist act. That is the act of violence. They're saying he was preoccupied with violence. He was preoccupied with murders and killing and dead bodies and all of those things. And that's why he carried out that there was no political agenda. It's a very specific crime, terrorism. So despite the fact that he had a download of this jihadi manual, and he used that apparently to produce the ricin that he made, and heaven knows what he was going to do with that. The thing with him pleading guilty is there's so much about this case we will probably never know the answers to. He was just 17 when he carried out the crime. He's 18 now, which is why we've been allowed to see this full picture of him as an adult, as opposed to when he was a cute kid. And so there's a lot we will never know from him. Why? Why those children? Why little girls? Why did he do it? What was the motivation? All of those things that now won't be examined, which I think is, if I were one of the parents, thank God I'm not, but I'd want to know that. I'd want to know those things, but the guilty plea probably means we won't hear much about it. So that's what I want to talk to you about really at midnight, is how do we deal going forward with this sort of crime? Have you ever had any dealings with Prevent? Have you ever reported anybody? Are there people you are suspicious of but you'd be afraid to report for fear perhaps of being called a racist? So we'll have a look at that at midnight. Before that, we have Vincent Moss, the fabulous Vincent Moss, in the studio going through the newspapers for tomorrow, and Van Connor, our film critic, will be with us as well to talk some movies that he's seen, and Phil Dave will also be chatting with us about some of the technical news that is knocking about at the moment, including TikTok. What's happening with that? But before that, as I was saying, the government's counter-extremism programme has been under the spotlight quite a lot, actually, in relation to the Southport murders. This morning, Prime Minister said that Britain now faces a new threat and that terrorism has changed. Well, the government-led multi-agency Prevent programme aims to stop individuals becoming terrorists, and police also play a key role. Critics, including Amnesty, have been raising concerns about the pre-crime intervention scheme, saying that the vast majority of people reported under Prevent do not represent any threat, and it's interfering with their lives and freedoms, leading to many to self-censor out of fear of being reported. But how does this scheme work, and who is it meant to prevent? Well, let's talk to Richard Garside now, who's director of the Centre for Crime and Justice Studies. Richard, thank you so much for joining me again. It's good to see you. Prevent is often under the spotlight and has been criticised widely for many, many years. But I know that they were concerned and are concerned with being thought of as Islamophobic or racist, and turn their attention now more to trying to stop far-right young people. Does that render them useless to be so concerned?
Well, I thought you did a really good introduction to the issue, so much so I was beginning to wonder what I was going to be able to add to what you said. I mean, I've heard obviously these reports that those working on Prevent are somehow concerned of these accusations of racism, and certainly kind of anecdotally it does appear that historically quite a lot of the caseload of Prevent has been individuals from black and minority ethnic groups, including those who profess an Islamic faith. But I think I think it's probably a bit of a reach to then say that suddenly everyone's running scared and they're all suddenly targeting a load of white racists, because at the end of the day, there is a concern in this country about the rise of the far right and concern about the use of violence by the far right. And in that context, it's perfectly reasonable for the police and other agencies to be concerned about their actions.
The thing is, though, that if they are, I mean, a terrorist can come in any shape or size, right? We know that. But when you look at the numbers, sort of eight out of 10, we are looking at extreme Islamist behaviour. So in terms of terror attacks, in terms of acts carried out, and indeed in terms of acts that are prevented, not by Prevent, but usually by the police at the later stages. So a lot of people would say, well, then you can't really be balanced. There is such a fear. I mean, we've got the same thing with the grooming gangs. You know, they're going to try and make it illegal to say Asian grooming gangs when we're talking about an Asian grooming gang. And I'm not talking about all Asians or all gangs, but when you want to get specific, you talk about these men were Asian, largely from Pakistani background, and they were in a gang who were raping girls. It feels like we're being silenced again into pointing out sometimes the obvious. If the facts back that up, that doesn't make you a racist.
No, indeed. And, if in a future point you want to talk about the sort of whole issue about the grooming gangs, I'd be very happy to come back on the programme and discuss that. I do think it's important, and I agree with it's really important we don't get into a form of denialism here, where we're effectively, at risk of kind of gaslighting the public, who can kind of see the news reports and can think, look, I can see what's being reported here. We also need to remember, of course, that news reports can often be quite selective in what gets covered. So there is also that. One of the things to perhaps bear in mind with Prevent is that, I mean, the whole Prevent agenda emerged really out of the initial reaction to what happened over 9/11, which was very clearly a religiously motivated attack by Islamists on America and on New York in particular, and then following the 7/7 attacks in London. And so certainly, in those early days and in many ways since, there has been a focus on religious and fundamentalist inspired terrorist activity, and a lot of that has been of a Islamic bent, and that's the reality of the situation. And you can see that in the numbers of organizations that are prescribed organizations also under the Terrorism Act, which many of them, I mean, the ones you'd expect to be there, like Al Qaeda, for example, but many of them are Islamic organizations in terms of their religious affiliation. I'm trying to use my word language carefully here. Although there's also a number of Irish paramilitary, Northern Irish paramilitary organisations who are prescribed as well. So there is a kind of a local flavour here, but there is also a kind of a long-standing, as it were, historical context where the prevent agenda came from. Now, whether it's fit for purpose in the future, going forward, of course, is an important part, because some of the most kind of famous or infamous violent attacks in this country are not formally counted as terrorist attacks. We were discussing the case in Southport, but I may be wrong about this, but I think that the Ariana Grande bombing was not formally classed as a terrorism attack, although I'm very happy to be corrected on that. But one of the reasons is the definition of terrorism under the Act, where it does have to effectively be the use of violence or force or other forms of intimidation for effectively political purposes motivated by religious, ideological, or other motivations. And so if you have these characters who are effectively, bedroom warriors who just seem to have a very, very dangerous, obsessive focus and interest in violence and spectacular acts, but no obvious religious or political motivation, then they are certainly falling outside the current scope of the definition of terrorism. Now, whether they should be included in as terrorists, that's of course an important question. And I think one of the things the Prime Minister announced today was a review of how we think about these acts and how we define them.
When we look at this agency being a pre-crime agency, that actually disturbs me somewhat. But I don't know how else we do it. And Keir Starmer to say terrorism has changed recently, I actually would argue with him about that we've always had these bedroom warriors. I mean, look at those girls that went across to join ISIS. They were radicalised in their bedrooms. I mean, as long as I've been a reporter, and a journalist, we've been talking about people who are self-radicalised or radicalised in their mosque, and then they go and sit in their bedrooms and do it. Or you've got the new incels now who hate women. They're self-radicalised in their bedrooms. This is not a new phenomenon. I don't know why Keir Starmer is saying it is.
Well, yes. I mean, I don't obviously know the mind of the Prime Minister on this. And I mean, whether the 3 or 4 girls who went off to Islamic State would be classed as terrorists rather than actually vulnerable young women who were effectively groomed into a terror cult, I think is an interesting and important question.
They went to support a terrorist organisation.
They did, but they were also under the age of children at the time, and arguably they were also let down by the authorities. So I think there's a whole complex story about that. But I'm glad that you raised the issue of incels and, by extension, young men with very, very violent and unhealthy attitudes and beliefs, often about women. I mean, this was the case, the Ariana Grande concert attack, for example. It was very clear this was largely young women at a concert, and they were targeted. The Southport, awful Southport incident, again, young girls at a Taylor Swift dance class. So we have here young men, and you can see this in some of the, the stories of these young men who then go on to commit very serious, horrendous acts of violence. That a lot of them have a background of misogyny, of violence towards the women and girls in their lives. And I don't think we're taking that seriously enough. And, a number of, feminists pointed out today that the Prime Minister talked about children being killed in Stockport, and they were certainly children, but they were also young girls. And I think we're not taking seriously enough the kind of growth potentially of just some very serious, violent, misogynistic movements and groupings, not just in this country but across the world, which are very, very dangerous potentially.
Yes, I agree with you. Terrifyingly so.
To answer your question, therefore, about pre-crime, I'm not myself particularly in favour of a pre-crime approach if what we mean by that is that we can just throw the net wide and scoop up a load of people, a few of whom potentially are going to be dangerous. I also, though, recognise the dilemma facing the police, other authorities, and ultimately the government. Because if a government can't take adequate steps to seek to intervene and prevent very, very serious acts of violence against British citizens and indeed anybody living in this country, then frankly, what is the point of government at that point? So I do think that I welcome actually that the Prime Minister's announcing we need to have a bit of a review of the approach and the arrangements. I think it's important that we don't, as it were, bend the stick too far the other way and suddenly, there's kind of a carte blanche, just scoop up a load of people. At the same time, this really does need to be taken very seriously, because at the end of the day, we know that there are individuals who are bent on causing horrendous violence and harm to individuals, many of them actually girls and women. And if that's not taken seriously, then I do think that's a dereliction of responsibility by our government.
But when you look at the Prevent and the 3 times that this murderer was reported to them, I understand from Prevent that you have to agree to be mentored. It's not something they can force you to do. So this troubled young man was referred to Prevent and could easily have said, "I'm not interested." What good are they in that case then? I mean, they're costing us tens of billions of pounds. If you can't force somebody who you know is going in the wrong direction to get help, then what is the point of Prevent?
Yeah, I mean, just on the figures, I think, again, I might be wrong about this, it's about 40 to 50 million, not 40 to 50 billion. But again,
let me just double check.
Happy to be correct. Yeah. 40 to 50 billion would be about 10 times the budget of the current prison system. So I think it's probably 40 to 50. But nonetheless, your question and your point is obviously very important. I mean, there's about 6,000 to 7,000 individuals who are referred to Prevent every year. About 40% of those referrals come from schools, and about 30 to 35% of those referred are young people. I'm going to hazard a guess, mostly young men, between the ages of 15 and 20. Now, so that's interesting in itself. We're talking about a relatively young age cohort, and that kind of, in a sense, says something about what Prevent is there to do, which is to seek to intervene early to try to de-radicalize. And they do that in a number of ways. They offer mentoring, can offer, maybe help with just thinking about where do I want to be in my life. Perhaps if there's a particularly strong religious element to it, maybe a rather distorted theological understanding, then it could include some theological mentoring, going and speaking to respected figures in the community to help them think through their own views about their religion and what it means to them, and so on and so forth. Is it successful? Well, in one sense, it's kind of trying to prove a negative, isn't it? Because we don't necessarily know whether it should be compulsory or voluntary. I mean, I am in favor of the scheme being voluntary, because I think if you make it compulsory, then people are going to kind of, fold their hands and they're not going to engage. But it is worth bearing in mind, of course, and this has been one of the criticisms of Prevent. It might be voluntary, but it comes with let's put it politely, a rather firm hand around the shoulder. Because at the end of the day, individuals who are referred to Prevent, if they choose not to engage and it's felt they should engage, then of course the police and other agencies have different ways of seeking to keep an eye on them and make sure that they are aware that they are being kept an eye on. Now, again, whether those arrangements are effective enough is another question. And clearly, you're never going to have perfect safety in a complex society, but there will of course be questions asked about the individual involved in the Southport attack and whether things could have been done at an earlier point.
Good to talk to you, always is, and I will take you up on that offer when we talk again about the gangs, the rape gangs. So thank you very much indeed for making that. That's Richard Garside there, Director of the Centre for Crime and Justice Studies. Right, got to take a quick break. Back in a sec.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and a good evening to you. So coming up at midnight, we're going to be discussing prevent and how indeed we do prevent the sort of killing that we saw in Southport. And Charles has just said Southport, the guy who I will not name, was convicted of terrorism. If it wasn't terrorism, then they should not have charged him with anything regarding terrorism. There are enough laws without using them. He dressed like a terrorist, had the book and made poison with intent to kill, and went for young Western girls as per the terrorist playbook in Manchester, Taylor Swift concert, etc. Please stop this nonsense of saying he's not a terrorist. You don't have to shout Allahu Akbar to be one. He is a terrorist, even if he's not the dictionary definition of such. Charles, look, yes, I'm just talking about the facts. I'm not talking about what I think he is, right? He pled guilty to the murder of those three girls and to the attempted murder of others. He was, and therefore is guilty of that. He also pled guilty to having a terrorist manual and to having a ricin. But for the killings, he has not been charged with terrorism. Right? Now, whether you think it's, I might even agree with you, but I'm just telling you that those were that's what he pled guilty to, that's what he's been found guilty of, and that's what he will be sentenced for. So, and actually the dictionary definition of terrorism, it is important. I may not agree with the dictionary definition of terrorism, but the law will only prosecute somebody for terrorism if they believe there was an idealistic or a religious aim to the killings with the potential to change the political landscape of this country, or whatever the definition. I've got the definition, actually. I'll read it to you later. So I'm just telling you the facts. You can have your own opinion. I love people with their own opinion, but you can't have your own facts. So that's just the point. That's what he was. And I can read to you from several newspapers here saying that there was no, despite the youngest son admitting to a terrorism charge, and that was holding the Al-Qaeda book, the National Counter-Terrorism and Policing Unit has not designated the attack as a terrorist incident for which an ideological motive would need to be established. It is understood that there was no evidence of him harbouring any Islamic tendencies has been uncovered by the authorities. And I did go, what, despite having the Jihad handbook, but he used that apparently to produce the ricin. So yeah, I'm just telling you how it is, that's all. So I do want to talk about this and to look at prevent and really to see how effective this body can possibly be. And, if we have got these largely young men in their bedrooms, sort of self-radicalising, if you like, by going down the rabbit holes of what's on the internet, I mean, I don't know how this murderer was able to keep what he had hidden under his bed. I mean, I made sure that I knew what was in my son's bedroom most of the time. Pretty revolting. Didn't want to know. But nothing like a knife or a machete or indeed ricin. So I think there are questions to be asked there. But the idea that this is some form of new radicalisation is crackers. This has been going on for a very, very long time, where young people have been radicalised at home or in their local mosque or in the very small microcosms. And the idea that they're not all just these big groups of Al-Qaeda. They're not. We know about this philosophy of Al-Qaeda, which is to go out and do it yourself, unplanned, no messaging. That was what they instructed their acolytes to do, was to go out on their own. Hence the term lone wolf, which I hate because it sounds rather sexy. So I won't use that. Lone scumbag who goes out and murders with an ideology in mind. I don't know what the answer is to this, but I don't know. I'm fairly certain prevent isn't the answer to it, because it's very difficult to see it's working when somebody like this, somebody as violent as this, is put forward 3 times to prevent and each time nothing has happened. So I want to talk to you about that. It's great to get your messages, and thank you for yours, Charles. Brilliant. So give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Calls charge at the national rate, and you can message me as well. Put the word talk up front and then your message to 87222. We are all rightfully angry about this killer doing what he did, and also having been seemingly reasonably easy to stop. It's outrageous. But give me a call, we'll talk about it later.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a good evening to you. It is Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock, and we've been talking about the murderer, the Southport stabbings. And the real concern is that this scumbag was on everybody's radar, it seems, including his father's radar. So it is heartbreaking to think that he was able to carry out the crimes that he did. What was missed? I mean, nothing, according to the schools who expelled him or excluded, or whatever it's called now, and the agencies that knew about him. Nothing was missed. I don't know. Anyway, I'd love to hear from you. I know we're all angry about this, and you might just want to vent that, and you can do that. But prevent badly let us down, and as the strapline there says, preventing nothing. So we'll be talking about that a little bit later on, so please do give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Now, though, it is time to turn our attention to some technology news with Phil Dave, broadcaster. Hello, Phil.
Oh, good evening, Lady Hosken.
Good evening to you. Now, I am a fan of TikTok, I have to say.
Are you?
Talking dogs.
Right.
Look, I have to deal.
Somehow this doesn't fascinate me. Now, before, when you were at the earlier point of that statement, that was intriguing. Now I just think, that explains it.
That explains. Yeah, I need to empty my brain of all the horror stories that I have to read every day, right? So.
Please don't get me started. You've no idea how I'm biting my tongue right now, based on.
Yeah, I know. Anyway. But I have to read so much nasty stuff that the only thing that really gets me through it is to see a dog talking in an American accent. which I love. So
I mean, I suppose Bailey's got a British accent. So.
yeah, he has got a British accent, so that's not quite as funny. But so I'm glad that America has got another 75 days of TikTok, but it's already been found to be illegal by the courts in America. So they're going to have to trust that Donald Trump or nobody will prosecute them for allowing it to be on their platforms.
It's all a very complicated story, but the main reason I chose it is because I sort of felt when I read this I was stepping into a little bit of the tech twilight zone, because I don't know whether or not you recall, but I think you and I have spoken about a good few years ago the fact that it was actually Donald Trump who was the one who originally banned TikTok in the US. So what just amused me about this more than ever is actually now all of a sudden he's the savior of TikTok. So to anyone who might have missed it, basically TikTok was, if anyone doesn't know, by the way, TikTok is a social media platform that's owned by the Chinese, and the niche, if you will, is it's all about people releasing second-long videos or whatever it is. They're on average, they're not very long, these videos. They might be a couple of minutes at most, but it's designed ultimately for people with either low attention span or should we just say people who like to digest something in a hurry. That's the sort of the target. So I'm disappointed to learn that it appeals to you, Lady Hosken, because I don't associate you with that particular category. However,
I have a very low attention span when I want to.
Stuff and nonsense. But anyway, that to one side. That is sort of like their raison d'etre, if you will. However, the point is that because it's Chinese owned, in America for many years there's been many questions raised, and in this country as well, but just primarily in America they've actually taken action as to the security of TikTok and whether or not it can be trusted and whether or not there is propaganda or any sort of hoo-ha appearing on that site. I mean, to be honest, most social media sites are subject to propaganda, but TikTok in particular, based on its ownership. And so under the Biden administration, actually what happened is that they decided that, okay, it is a bit of a risk and therefore it was banned. Now Donald Trump has come along, in spite of, remember what I was saying earlier on, when he was last in office, he was the one who tried to ban it. And now he has come along and saved it and reinstated it in the US. But he's reinstated it sort of half-heartedly, I'd suggest, because from my understanding at the moment you can't download it if you're a new user, and if you want to update it you can't do that either. So it's really only for existing users. So of course TikTok are delighted, but it's still very up in the air. I think kind of it gets to a stage where you have to think that there are two trains of thought here. Number one is, if there is this dependency on social media platforms, isn't it amazing the kind of power that a government can have that sort of at the flick of a switch could mean that it's somehow either available or no longer available to you? And secondly, why is it that no one can make up their mind as to whether or not it actually is a security threat or not?
Well, yeah, because they're talking about people's data, and the thing that I've been watching it a bit. I've watched it today to see some of the responses to the Trump administration beginning, and it was actually really eye-opening and interesting. And a lot of people have made their money from. There are 7 million small businesses on TikTok, and look, data is mined when you go grocery shopping, right? If you have a loyalty card or whatever. I mean, you know, we are aware. It just depends on what data. I've never seen any political propaganda on there. I mean, apparently Trump likes it because he reckons he got his... I never saw any Trump videos on there, but my algorithm is all about talking dogs. So maybe that's why. I think it's worthwhile saying to anyone who doesn't know what an algorithm is, just in case, sorry, that algorithm is ultimately is the pattern of which you use the internet. So in other words, at a particular website, an algorithm will react based on what you have previously looked at on said website and start suggesting things that might be useful to you or of interest to you based on those previous results. Yeah, I also like Garen Noon, if anyone knows who he is. He's Irish. He's delicious. He's very funny. But anyway, yeah, I know. Yeah, look. Don't look down on me. I'm
not looking down. I just don't know what the heck you're talking about.
There's some.
And it's not very often that happens.
No, there's some fun stuff on that. I mean, it's a good way to empty my brain. That's the only thing I can say, and I enjoy it. And I'm glad to see that the Americans are staying because they're very funny. and there's some great people on there. But it is interesting, isn't it, that Trump but then that's Trump, isn't it? You never know what he's going to do next. I mean,
listen, that's one of the reasons why I found it fascinating. I'm not necessarily. Let me put it this way: I'm not necessarily anti-Republican. I do question Donald Trump as the Republican candidate and now president, but it's more about I just don't. How can I put it? I don't understand how someone can go 180. You know, he's gone from literally being the villain of TikTok to the savior and it just I found it interesting.
Keir Starmer said he was going to look after old people, and look what he's done.
Very true. Yes,
so I think we're getting used to seeing this now. Phil,
can we conclude from this? Politicians might tell a fib once in a while.
Might do.
Only might.
Just every time their lips are moving. Allegedly. What's this wonder material that could hold the key to near limitless energy?
Yes, well, it's sort of abbreviated to REBCO, and you might understand why when I tell you it actually stands for rare earth barium copper oxide, which is a rather extraordinary material all the same, because basically it's a high-temperature superconductor, so that it exhibits basically near zero electrical resistance at approximately minus 200 degrees Celsius. Let's get our heads around that. Minus 200 degrees Celsius, so twice sort of the twice negative boiling point. That's super cold basically. So achieving that with sort of like a liquid nitrogen cooling, what it does is this REBCO has the ability to levitate above magnets. So obviously magnet, basic physics, you've obviously got north versus south. If you have north and south together, it attracts. If you have north and north and south, they repel. They sort of bounce off of each other. So that's the way that magnets will ultimately levitate and repel. But this actual phenomenon is known as superconductive magnetic levitation. Keep up with me here. This material is quite pivotal in the actual sort of development of advanced magnetic systems in particular. And what they're actually hoping for is that it's got an ability to revolutionize nuclear fusion. So again, nuclear fusion is the buildup of energy in a confined space, and that energy is therefore converted into the kind of energy that we might be able to make use of somehow. So whether or not it's powering a house or whatever it may be. And this is why a lot of people want to see nuclear as the way forward, because it is seen as a sort of quite a clean alternative without necessarily being environmentally damaging. And this particular magnetic substance that has been discovered has the capabilities, as I say, in very extreme circumstances, to be able to conduct this magnetic levitation, basically the ability to create this friction, this energy in a confined amount of space, even more effectively than has previously been established.
Wow.
So scientists are sort of suggesting that this could be the future of nuclear fusion.
Well, then it'll be bought by an oil company and shoved in a vault somewhere, won't it?
Yes, there is always that danger, but sort of I think if one looks at it with hopefully a slightly more optimistic pair of eyes, that hopefully what could happen is that if we're talking about the kind of surplus energy that what's being described by scientists as near limitless energy, by the way, and at zero carbon, if that is the case, what you potentially be looking at in future, I predict, energy bills where you actually end up paying less so for the energy, but more for the maintenance of these nuclear reactors. So in other words, it would be irrelevant because the energy will be there anyway. So it would just be there for anyone who wants it and anyone to dip into it, especially if it's nationalised.
Yeah, they'll always find a way of charging us, Phil. I mean, even if the energy is free.
Of course, anyone is going to find a way. But it is interesting to think that actually sort of, whereas now an awful lot of the money of energy bills goes into actually generating that electricity and that energy, this might actually be a case of that you'd no longer have to pay for the generation of it because it's there. It's more about the maintenance of the generation of it.
Very interesting. I love this story as well. The UK Ministry of Defence has enlisted sci-fi writers to prepare for dystopian futures. I wish I'd known about this. I've got so many ideas about dystopian futures in my head. They're my favourite genre of film.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well,
every day is
end of the world.
Day.
Yeah.
You've pretty much summed it up for me, really. But there's a recent event that's organised by the Resilience Beyond Observed Capabilities, or RBOC. It's a network, you see, and they are supported by the MOD. And they had a collection of sci-fi authors who collaborated with researchers and crisis management experts, I think it was, to basically sort of envisage this sort of, if you like, these dystopian scenarios that it could occur. And one such scenario, which I just thought was quite interesting, because of course it's obviously very relevant to technology, was perhaps involving a mass electronic failure. So potentially immobilizing thousands of individuals, or even self-driving cars, you know. So all of these different potential scenarios, especially as we sort of hurtle towards a time where electricity is the be-all and end-all for so many aspects of life. And it got me thinking, as much as I understand when some people would be forgiven for saying, well, it's only a bit of energy, you know, we're quite used to blackouts because if we've got a power cut or something like that. This is a bit beyond that. You know, let's just say that we're talking about a more digitized world where it is far easier to hack something and then to ultimately change its properties and abilities. But now imagine whether or not someone has life dependency on electricity. So maybe those who are in hospital, for example, who
I mean, look,
have...
even as basic as money. I mean, you know, trying to get money out of a machine without electricity, or what, or pay for shopping, you know, without that thing. I mean, it's just so much that could go wrong.
There are loads of ways that it could go wrong, and so scientists and these dystopian authors, if you like, or dystopian scenario authors, I should say, are actually sort of banging their heads together with the Ministry of Defence trying to come up with it. And it got me thinking, you know, sort of whereas before that might have sounded like something out of commissioning a drama for ITV or something, it now actually becomes a major reality.
I want to read the scenario that talks about zombies, because I know exactly what to do in a zombie apocalypse.
Lock your door?
Phil, no, it's way more come on, it's way more complicated than that. But I've got the plan.
They must repel something. Is it like throwing salt over a slug? Not that I encourage that. Don't get any less about animal cruelty. I'm just asking.
No, I'll talk you through my my defence plan. But I'm where you want to be if there's a zombie apocalypse. So come round to mine.
I've often associated you with a zombie.
Yeah. Gary has messaged saying, great show, Petrie, and made even better now that the bootylicious Mr. Phil Dave has joined you. And that's from Gary.
It makes me go very red.
I know,
Gary, you're very naughty. Stop it.
He's a very naughty boy. Phil, you're not. Thank you very much indeed. I will speak to you soon.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good evening to you. Just to let you know that at the top of the hour, Vincent Moss will be here to go through the newspapers for us. Right, now though, it is time for Van the Man Connor, who's our film critic. Van, how are you?
Good evening, Petrie. How are you doing, lovely?
Do you know what? It's Tuesday. I think it's only just been Blue Monday, so this is ever so slightly grey Tuesday.
So it's a greyish Tuesday.
Yeah,
I'll go with that. I'll go with that, yeah.
But you're going to brighten it up for me. So here we go. A complete unknown.
Yes, first of two bangers we have for this week. So Complete Unknown. You can't have missed this one. This is the Timothy Chalamet Bob Dylan movie.
Oh, of course, yeah. I always forget what it's called. I just don't think it's a very good name. It should be called the Bob Dylan movie.
Well, I don't know. Why not have called it The Times They Are a Changin', or Mr. Tambourine Man would have been a good one, to be honest.
I'd remember that. Yeah. A complete unknown.
Yeah.
I'm like, they won't stick. But is it good?
Well, obviously, it is a line, obviously, from Like a Rolling Stone. So that's kind of, and the movie does largely revolve around the performance of Like a Rolling Stone. So it is very good. It stars Chalamet as Dylan when he's starting out. It takes place only over a couple of years, and it's very specifically the point at which Dylan breaks onto the folk scene in the early '60s, under effectively the tutelage and sort of mentorship of Pete Seeger, who's played here by his fellow BAFTA nominee, Edward Norton. The pair of them are up for BAFTAs for this. And he then sort of bucks with tradition and finds himself on the outs with the entire folk community when he has the unmitigated audacity to embrace electric instruments, leading to the iconic performance at the 1965 Newport Folk Festival, and the album, of course, Dylan Goes Electric. So I've got a clip for you. This is quite a cute little moment. This is Dylan going to like a cocktail party, and of course, the minute he turns up, everyone wants exactly one thing of him, and you can guess what that would be.
Hey, Pete.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good.
Nice
Great to see you.
How you doing? They made around the world in 80 days, huh?
It's a magic carpet ride. Just full of wonder. Full of wonder.
This is Becca, by the way. We can talk.
Nice to meet you. This is my wife, Toshi.
Nice to meet you. I absolutely love your music. I'm such a big fan, Mr. Seeger.
Pete. Harold's putting the lean on you there? Trying to get you to play?
Yeah, a little bit.
All right, well, don't hold it against him. It's for a good cause. Want to use this beauty?
They always keep it handy, huh, Pete? He's like a gunfighter with a six-gun, always keeping it close. Oh, the time will come up.
That's amazing. And he learnt to play the guitar for that part, didn't he?
He did.
I mean, that's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's all
Is that his voice? Or is that
It is.
Bob Dylan's voice?
No, it is actually all Chalamet. So this is from the writer-director of Walk the Line as well, the Johnny Cash one. And Johnny Cash turns up in this as a character played by Boyd Holbrook, but albeit a much more cartoonish and drunken Johnny Cash than we're used to seeing depicted on screen. But yeah, it's all Chalamet performing, it's all Edward Norton performing, and it's like they are performing in the actual scene. It's not like they've just done it and they lip-sync it in the studio afterwards where they go and record it properly. It's all done live. I think this is really, really good. You don't learn an awful lot about what Bob Dylan's like as a man, except he's very difficult and a bit spoilt, which to be fair is probably quite accurate to the modern day as well. Chalamet is very, very good as him though, but it is Chalamet playing Chalamet. That being said, though, it is a Bob Dylan movie, so it's therefore automatically the mumbliest movie you've ever heard in your life.
Yeah, I would have imagined that anyway. Okay, so this is in cinemas now, is it? A complete unknown?
It is. This is in cinemas right now, in fact, yeah.
Is it one of those 14-hour films, or do we get in and out?
No, it's about 2 1/4, I think. Right. But to be fair, it doesn't feel like it overstays its welcome. Okay. You do romp along with it. And like I said, by the time it builds up to the actual 1965 Newport Folk Festival, you are really in. Like, it gets the vibes down perfectly. Like, I'm not really a big Bob Dylan fan, but I did feel the vibes through this. Oh, yeah, okay, I'm grooving with this, yeah.
Excellent. What about Wolfman?
Well, Wolfman's also in cinemas now, and it is a cracking time. So, this was originally meant to be a Ryan Gosling movie, and then he dropped out for scheduling reasons. And he's been replaced in something of an epic downgrade by Christopher Abbott, who no one could really pick out of a lineup. I know him from the movie Possessor, really good Brandon Cronenberg movie. And it is the story of an unemployed writer who has a younger journalist wife who's a bit difficult. She's played by Julia Garner from the Inventing Anna Netflix show.
Oh yeah,
The
brilliant.
Assistant. And obviously she always plays kind of an icy, very difficult kind of a character, so she has been very well cast for this. And the pair of them and their young daughter trek out to a remote farmhouse in the Oregon woods that belonged to his late father, ostensibly to pack it up and sell it on. On the way there, though, they are attacked by a wild animal. He gets a scratch on his arm, and they flee inside the house. And over the course of one night, the whole movie takes place over one night, they have to fend off this ferocious, completely unknown creature that's on the outside, whilst on the inside, Daddy starts to get a little ill.
Gets a little hairy, does he?
Things are getting hairy for Daddy. Yeah, let's just say that. So I've got a clip for you. This is sort of sizzle from the trailer.
Blake. Daddy, can you hear me?
Are you okay? Blake?
Blake?
Something's happening to me. I can't understand you.
Blake, is that you? Blake. You're scaring me.
Daddy. We love you. What's wrong with him?
He's sick.
Oh. Yeah, that's quite scary. I also think that is everybody's nightmare, isn't it? Their teeth falling out. Certainly mine.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And yes, it is very, very scary. This thing starts with the sequence that reminds you a lot of that great moment in M. Night Shyamalan's Signs, where the alien just walks across the alley and it just shivers you right at the spine. And it only gets more terrifying from there. I thought this was a hell of a ride. It's from the writer-director of...
What's the certification of it?
It's a 15. And but it follows on from The Invisible Man in a sense. It's the same writer director, and it's another Universal classic monster. It's not as good as The Invisible Man, but Invisible Man was a 5-star movie. This is like a 4. So I can't really fault it for that. I think the performances are very good, but the big star here for me is the direction. It is the style of it, the cinematography. You can see the shots in that sizzle where the world drifts away.
Yeah.
And there's a very clever trick they use whereby as he starts to transform more and more and he starts mumbling and becoming incoherent, every now and again the perspective shifts. And so all the color palette changes and all the human beings start mumbling and becoming incoherent whilst he's perfectly normal. It's really clever and really well done. And oh my God, you're going to be clawing at the armrests, shrieking. I can tell you anecdotally that my partner left me with the inability to use my right arm after this movie because honestly, she squeezed it to death. People were genuinely screaming, terrified.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's true. I don't really do that scary movies.
I'll take you, Petrie. We'll have a great time.
Have you got I'll use the other arm.
You use the other arm, yeah. I've got one good one left.
Got one good one left. Okay, I'm not sure it's for me, but a complete unknown. I definitely will have a look at that. Let's have a look at, just quickly, we've got about a minute, the Oscar voters building support for juror number 2.
Yes, in an act of absolute defiance and something of a finger being thrown up to Warner Brothers because of how badly they treated Clint Eastwood with the release of this film, which at one point they had intended to just dump to streaming. Oscar voters are, voting with their feet, so to speak, and they are pushing for juror number 2 to get an Oscar nomination. We're going to find out later this week.
Do they have that sort of power? Can they do that? Can they go against the great?
They absolutely can. They can nominate whatever they want, but we shall find out.
That would be brilliant, wouldn't it? I would love that as well as a you know, thumb to nose to the how stuck up they can be with movies as well, because actually it is about people enjoying it, and if you enjoy it, you want to see it do well.
Well, this was meant to be his final film. This is intended to be like Eastwood's final film. So the idea that you would behave badly towards a filmmaker that has garnered you, I think it's something like 7 nominations and 3 actual Oscars.
Yeah, well, good for them then.
Insane.
Yeah, it is insane. Van, thank you very much indeed. See you soon. Van Connor there, our film critic. Now, coming up in the top of the hour, we have Vincent Moss here. He is going to be taking you through the newspapers for tomorrow, so don't go anywhere.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, it is good to have your company, and I'm thrilled to say that we are all in the company of Vincent Moss, a former political editor. It's nice to see you.
Hi, Petrie.
We're loving the weather, aren't we, Vincent? We've just been moaning about our gardens being wrecked.
Very chilly, isn't it? Yeah.
It's not very nice. Not very nice at all. What I'm going to be talking about in a bit is the Prevent and the Southport killer. And all these details are coming out now, but we will never know some of the details, like why. Because he doesn't have to answer that question in a court of law. He's pled guilty to the murder of those 3 little girls, the attempted murder of others. He also pled guilty to having jihadi manual, which was the terrorism aspect of his charge, and having ricin. But a lot of people are angry that the killing of these girls wasn't deemed a terrorist act. And I've been trying to explain that it's a very specific description, and they don't believe that his killing of these 3 girls was motivated by any sort of political or ideological edge. He was just a violent killer who wanted to do harm. A lot of people find that very difficult to get to grips with, because they see this as a terrorist act.
Well, it is a terrorist act, but it wasn't one by the definition of the PREVENT scheme. So they're clearly going to have to look at that and redefine their definitions.
I agree.
Because there are a lot of people who are being referred to PREVENT and aren't being monitored because they're similar sort of cases where they're terrorists in the sense they cause terror, but they're not from a political persuasion, or they're not trying to influence the government or get the government to change its mind. So they are going to have to be changes.
They are going to have to change that definition, because even the court or the CPS wasn't able to charge those killings as terrorism, because they couldn't find any ideological, political reason for doing it. But like I said, there's so many people getting so many messages from people. He's saying he was a terrorist. He is a terrorist. And when Keir Starmer was talking earlier on today, he kept referring to the children that were killed. These were girls. That is part of the MO. These were little girls. They weren't just children. They were young girls, and it's the same with the Ariana Grande concert. It was largely girls that the killer there was going after. So it seems there's a lot of nervousness to actually talk about what we can all see, and somehow we're not allowed to say it.
Yeah, and there's more emerging all the time. I mean, the Times is reporting that it looks like, in addition to, of course, the murders, the terrible Southport murders, he managed to get ricin, that lethal toxin, online. And that he had all sorts of... The Times says it understands that he was in possession of material about Nazi Germany, self-driving car bombs and massacres, some of which he'd accessed on social media. So there's going to have to be further action on social media platforms to stop young people getting around age verification things, whether it's to buy knives, as he did as a 17-year-old, bought knives on Amazon. And there has to be ways of stopping that, stopping them both accessing harmful material in terms of content, but also getting weapons like ricin and getting knives online.
Well, he made the ricin.
Yeah,
he got the castor oil. In the jihadi
yeah,
manual, but he got castor oil seeds or something, I don't know, and was able to make it using that manual. It's very interesting about the like you said, the front page of the Times for Wednesday, discussing here that the Southport killer got the knife on Amazon. A retail giant branded a disgrace by ministers. Now, I don't know about you. I want to get a knife for my garden, and at the moment I'm just using an old kitchen knife. But it's quite a process you have to go through. And I've just had a message here from Gary who says, I work for Amazon. He must have known we were going to talk about this. As a delivery driver, the Southport murderer must have got someone else to get him the knife, as anyone under 25 has to show ID if the driver hasn't followed the procedure. Is he an accessory to murder? And I know that when I got some kitchen knives or whatever, I had to sign for them, and it was quite a procedure to go through that. So how did he get away with it at 17?
This is the thing, they always seem to find a way around these age verification processes, but I didn't know that. That's a very interesting email in that you've had, because I didn't know you had to sign for knives on the doorstep like that.
Yeah, it's like if you buy alcohol or something, you have to, you know, somebody who isn't a kid has to accept the delivery of it.
Well, one of the things the government has announced in the last day or so is this idea of age verification on your phone, so you
using
can prove,
facial identity,
so you can prove who you are, and it clearly needs things like that, because it's astonishing just how many illegal things this killer was able to do in terms of getting hold of all sorts of things he shouldn't have got hold of. And of course he was caught with a knife more than 10 times, and that was just the amount of times he was caught with a knife, let alone how many times he was actually out possessing a knife.
And also his father, I was reading earlier, had stopped him a week earlier getting into a taxi, which was what he did. He got into a taxi to the dancing class, the dance class, and his father had stopped him from doing that because he knew he was going to do something bad. There's questions to be asked there as well. I mean, you know, how responsible are parents for their children's behaviour? That is a question that comes around every time we have a young person.
Absolutely. He sounds unstoppable. The speculation in that incident is that he may well have been off to a school, school, to commit some kind of school massacre. But if he's so determined, and he's a 17, going on 18-year-old at the time, and he has a knife, what can the parents do? I mean, it feels like they should have been taking action in terms of referring him to the police.
And just saying, look, I think he's going to do something bad.
But it all seems to track back to the fact he was referred to Prevent, and because he didn't fit their profile, action wasn't taken.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? It is about the profile. And then with Keir Starmer saying that that we've got a new branch of a new type of terrorism. That's absolute nonsense, because the people have been self-radicalising in their bedrooms, young people, for decades. I mean, this is not new. Why is he saying it's new? He said Britain is facing new terror threat from a generation of young men in their bedrooms. I don't think it's new.
And we've been seeing this going on in America for years, where it's not particularly a religious ideology. It's just
the incels,
young men who are committing these massacres in US schools. And it's much worse over there, of course, because of the availability of guns. Whereas here, I say it's only knives. I mean, knives, of course, can be deadly, but not anywhere near as deadly as guns are in the States.
Yeah, I mean, if this murderer had managed to get hold of a gun, I mean, there is you know, that. It could have been a hell of a lot worse. But it is, you've got this organisation, Prevent. It's been around for a while now, since 7/7, I think, maybe even before. And its job is a pre-crime agency, it's being referred as. So you stop somebody before they commit a crime. But like you said, how effective is it if you've got somebody who has got violent ideology? You know, he was looking at images of all wars and things like that, and was known to be talking about death and bodies and violence and killing at school. You know, everybody knew this about him. And the parents of those little girls, I mean, that would be devastating to know that this murderer had been referred, and the police always had to go along with social services, if they were paying a visit, because they were afraid of what he'd do to them. He was known to be violent. These multi-agencies, social services, the police, Prevent, the schools, probably did as much as they could by looking at it, but they all failed those little girls.
Very much so. And it's not like he was a borderline person that needed action.
No.
He was completely at the top end of the scale by all that we're finding out about him. And there's always the case that Prevent will say they haven't got the resources to track everybody and deal with everybody. Well, exactly. But surely this individual should have been at the absolute top of the list for action. He seemed to tick every single box, whether it's from sort of preparing poison, buying lives illegally, being radicalised in terms of the content he was looking at, and being a very disenfranchised, very unhappy young man. You would have thought that he needed some... I mean, there will always be the problem that I would have thought just being in possession of a knife 10 times would be enough to take him off the streets, let alone anything else.
Yeah, I mean, what happened to the zero tolerance with knife crime? What happened to if you're caught carrying a knife more than 3 times, you'll do 5 years in prison? I don't think a single person has ever done that sentence, by the way.
Well, exactly, yeah.
I mean, it just seems that we're fed this BS so often, that laws will, we'll learn from these mistakes, we won't do this again, oh look, don't worry, we've got a grip on knife crime. If kids are caught carrying a knife more than 3 times, they will go to prison, no if, no buts. And it doesn't happen. It just seems like we're just told anything to make us go away.
Yeah. And now he will cost a fortune because he'll be in the prison system for a very long time. The sentence hasn't been levied yet, but I think because of his age he can't get a full
He can't get a whole life.
But he will get a substantial prison sentence, which again comes at a cost of £40,000-50,000 a year. So there's a huge sum of money invested in somebody that could be better spent, or could have been a fraction of that sum spent, and lives saved if he'd been tackled at an earlier point.
And you've also got to you've got to look at the families. And although one way of looking at this is to say, look, he didn't put them through the torture of, I hope he doesn't get any mitigation for that, that he didn't put them through the torture of a trial. But he didn't do it for them. But there will be things that we will never know about this crime because there wasn't a full trial.
No, and I suspect that might be one of the reasons. I mean, there often is a little bit of mitigation for a plea and sparing. No, you would very much hope not in this case. But I suspect that one of the reasons he did enter a very late plea of guilty is that he didn't want some of this information about him emerging. Now, it looks as though some of it, particularly in the Times, in Wednesday's Times, is emerging because the police and others who may have access to this information do want to be sharing it. So, for example, the Times has referenced, as we discussed earlier, about Nazi Germany material and self-driving car bombs is sort of leaking out, because I think that is in the public interest, and people are sort of determined to get some of this stuff about him in the public domain. But this story will continue to be covered over the coming days because people are now fascinated, rightly so, about the shortcomings in the system that failed to stop him at the point before he got to committing these murders.
Part of that jigsaw puzzle is to know what his motivation was. Was it misogyny? Was it some other form of ideology? I mean, as a mother, I'd want to know why he did it.
Yeah, and what happened to him? I mean, was there something, of course there's no excuse, but was there something in his life or something in his background that set him on this path? Was there an incident that set him down this sort of rabbit hole of terrible anger, content and hatred of society and hatred of people? What set him on that path?
It's just that there would be so many questions I would have for him. Were I to be one of the parents that lost their child that day, because the why, I think, is as important as every other piece of information. Why a little girl? Why?
Absolutely. And hopefully they will have their say in some kind of victim impact statement, so we will presumably
but he won't
hear from them.
He's apparently when he bothers to turn up at court, he probably won't be there for sentencing. He probably won't be bothered. They'll do it by Zoom link. But he smirks. He's been smiling at the press that were there on the first occasion where he didn't speak. He didn't speak in his first showing there. His second one, he just whispered guilty, looked at the floor. He's not engaging in it, and so there are things that we will never know, and that would drive me absolutely around the twist. I couldn't cope with that.
Yeah, and one of the things you would hope is that the focus does remain from now on, apart from finding out the shortcomings, on the victims and their families, and that his image disappears. This is a very striking image, and the transformation of him in his school uniform as a youngster to how he looks now. But one would hope that that image disappears from newspapers and media and things, so that he doesn't become lionised and become famous and notorious, which is one of the things he would,
I
of course,
agree.
want.
I agree with that. But talking of the image, that's a very interesting point, isn't it? Because up until the last week or the last few days, we didn't have a picture of him as a grown-up. We only had that lovely, cute picture of him when he appeared in a Doctor Who trailer, or whatever it was. And a lot of people are asking why. Why? I mean, he was 17 when he committed the crime, but there was public interest. There's no judge in the land would say there wasn't. But he's saying, look, now that he's going to be 18, we're going to release an image of him. But a lot of people go, no, hang on a minute. That was twisting it. That twisted the narrative. It twisted the narrative that we didn't see it. Keir Starmer's saying he couldn't have said anything because it would have been in contempt of court. Now, I barely remember my court days as a reporter, but the one thing you can report is what somebody's being tried for, right? And their name, right? Their name, age, and what the charge sheet says. That you can report that.
If they're a certain age, if they're an adult, if they're a child, their identity can't be revealed.
But you could reveal the charge sheet. That's the whole point. It's actually on the outside of the courtroom, right? It's public. You go to the Old Bailey any day of the week and you'll see a name of somebody and what they've been charged with. That's in the public domain. So how Keir Starmer is now saying he couldn't have told us what he was being charged with because it would have been in contempt of court, I'm a bit surprised by.
Yes, and there do seem to be some things.
How is that contempt of court?
Well, I don't think it is. I'm not an expert, but I don't think it is. But I think the other element of it as well is whether or not the police could have said that he wasn't, as was mistakenly claimed at the time, an illegal immigrant, because that could potentially have prevented some of the civil unrest and disorder we saw, because people believed wrongly, as it turned out, he was an illegal immigrant. And they believed that wrongly and acted and tried to take retribution against people who'd come here as migrants because of that. Now, had the police and others revealed the information that he wasn't an illegal immigrant, that may have prevented some of the civil disorder. So that's another lesson that's got to be looked at from both the police and the authorities' sense about, can you release that information? Now, that information, I don't see how that could have prejudiced the court case or any proceedings.
The only thing that would have could have prejudiced the court case was the fact that he had been referred to prevent 3 times, right? That I agree. That would be in contempt of court, because that's like talking about previous crimes, if you like. But everything else that he has been charged and found guilty or pled guilty to, that is not contempt of court. So I don't know if Keir Starmer, I mean, he should know better than us. He was there for prosecutions. But I've spoken to a few people on this, and they've gone, no. I remember you could say it was Joe Blogs, an age, if sometimes, and these are the charges. You could nothing, and actually nothing else. So I don't understand why he's saying he couldn't have said this is, somebody who was born in the UK. He's, there are charges on the sheet that look at murder, and they found the terrorism manual very early on. So he could have said. And on that sheet as well, this jihadi manual. And there's nothing to have stopped him doing that.
That's right, and there have been suggestions in other cases that the police, you say, it's funny you should say, and I remember my court reporting days as well, all the cases are supposed to be publicly listed and available with people's names, charges and addresses and that sort of thing, although you don't necessarily publish the full address, you publish a partial address. Now, there have been other cases where certain cases haven't appeared in a public format where people can see them, because for reasons best known to themselves or for reasons they think are justifiable, the police and prosecutors have not revealed that information. This may be another one of those cases where the police and the authorities are deciding what gets revealed, and that's not appropriate.
That is not appropriate, and that's where it's wrong. But certainly to discuss or to let the public know what this individual was being charged with is not contempt of court. And I hope that Keir Starmer corrects that statement. There are things, of course, that would have been contempt of court, but he didn't have to reveal those. No. So that's, well, anyway, look, there's what else is here. Labour curbs environmental quangos to get Britain building. Labour is to strip environmental quangos of the power to delay big housing and infrastructure development. That's good, isn't it?
Well, if it means no more 100 million bat tunnels like we saw with HS2, then it's probably a good thing. You see so many developments, don't you, that are held up because somebody's discovered there are newts or frogs or something. So if it means that we can get homes built because we're a little less sort of ready to scrap things just because somebody's found a frog or a newt, then that's probably a good thing, I think, isn't it?
Well, it depends. What if they find a lesser spotted unicorn?
Well, exactly. If they find something cuddly that we like, like we like red squirrels, then maybe not. But and of course we love newts and we love frogs. Yeah. But also need houses.
We need houses. Well, there'll be a lot of people who are. Well, the quangos won't be happy, will they? Losing that power. Right, Vincent and I are going to take a quick break, but we will be back in just a moment.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good to have your company. It's Petrie here with you and with me, Vincent Moss, former political editor. And we're just going through the front pages for Wednesday. Now, the Daily Telegraph, I'm laughing because I just can't even believe what I'm reading here. Benefit cheats to be banned from roads, not the country. The actual tarmac things that we drive around on. Minister enforces toughest fraud measures in a generation to bring down the welfare bill. Benefit cheats being banned from driving for 2 years under proposed new anti-fraud law, because that really stops people from driving as well, doesn't it, a ban?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I've heard this. I'm sure this has been suggested in the past, isn't it? The government's under huge pressure, obviously, to save money, find money. One of the areas where it's under pressure to make those savings is the Work and Pensions Department, run by Liz Kendall. And there is a suggestion that if you have more than £1,000 in fraud, or you've wrongly claimed welfare benefits more than £1,000, you could lose your driving licence for up to 2 years if you still refuse to pay back the money. So it sounds like a very last-ditch sanction, and I doubt it'll probably apply to many, if any, people. But it is an idea. It does show the government is at least thinking about ways of trying to claw back the billions that are wrongly paid in benefits through fraud.
These are just the low-hanging fruit, aren't they? I always look at these things and go, "Oh, you idiots!" I mean, look, for a start, if you're a fraudster, you're probably more likely to drive without a licence or insurance anyway. What if you're on benefits and you can't afford a car? It's not really much of a punishment then, is it? What they can do is stop them walking on the pavements. You know, and what if they trying to get a job and they need a car to get a job to get off benefits? It doesn't work on any level. It's just absolute nonsense. And what they should be doing is tightening up their procedures and making sure that the system is fit for purpose, and that we don't see these farms of people coming over here and printing out different things and having hundreds and hundreds of false identities or dead, you know, old ladies' names that they use to claim benefits. I mean, that's where you concentrate, isn't it, on making it a better system?
Well, exactly. That is the big problem that you've highlighted, is it isn't just individuals claiming a few £100 they're not entitled to. It's the industrial racket where
costing us
often foreign
millions
criminals are coming here and claiming huge amounts by setting up multiple identities and stealing all of that money. I mean, of course, the other big problem they've got is the worst offenders should ideally be jailed, but of course there's no space in the jails to put anybody in jail. So I suspect jailing people has become less of an option because the jails are full to overflowing.
And how much of this fraud as well is people who've been wrongly paid? Because whenever I do these phone-ins, I get so many people saying, look, I got this money, I just assumed that was the money that I was supposed to be getting. I got a little bit more one month, a little bit less, I got a little bit more the month later, didn't even think about it, and then suddenly they come down on you like a ton of bricks and say, right, that's fraud because you didn't tell us about it. Well, how many of these people really aren't cheating the system, but the system has messed up on them? Because there's a good number.
Yeah, and it's a mixture, isn't it, of error and fraud.
Yeah.
But either way, you know, they need to claw the money back.
I mean, it's just stupid. I can't imagine there are many people claiming benefits have got a Lamborghini parked in the drive that they're aching to go out and speed around the countryside on a Sunday with. I mean, it's just nonsense.
If they're involved in heavy-duty fraud, they're not going to be too worried about car insurance and driving licences.
No, they're really, really not.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, how many people are just going to go, well, you know, he doesn't have a car, so he's not been banned. I do have a car and I've been banned. I'm being punished more than him, and yet we both defrauded the same amount of money. Again, it's not a fair.
No.
It's not a fair system. I don't know. They should put these things past me first. I can point out all.
But they're desperate to show that they're doing something on trying to curb the spiralling welfare bill, which is
to be
huge.
seen to be doing something, as opposed to actually doing something. Then there's the story about Harry very close to settlement in the Sun case. The Duke of Sussex is very close to agreeing a settlement. I thought he said he'd never settle. With the publisher of The Sun. The High Court heard yesterday delaying the opening day of his long-awaited trial. The 11th hour deal between the Duke and the News Group newspapers, NGN, was discussed behind the scenes yesterday as just about as the case was to get underway. I thought he said he wanted a trial, he wasn't going to settle, he needed this trial for everybody else that, had to settle.
Well, that's what the claim was, but it may be, and we don't know quite what's going on behind closed doors, and there hasn't been so far because all the other cases, I think more than 1,000, have been settled without any admission of wrongdoing. And it may be that one of the things he's seeking, in addition to a financial payment, is an admission of wrongdoing. And in the next day or so, we may find out what that is. But at the moment, that is all the lawyers behind closed doors. And the rumour is Prince Harry is very close to settling this case and his dispute with the Sun, but we just don't know.
Is he here?
No, I think one of the things that was claimed in court is that one of the reasons for the delays and the repeated request for adjournment is he is in California. So the judge was rather unimpressed that nobody wanted to get the Prince out of bed at 5:30 in the morning, which I would have thought if he's in court cases going on and he needs to be asked something, then you get him out of bed.
Get out of bed, lazy bones.
But I think that was one of the issues, is that he's in California, I think, at the moment.
Well, yeah. We'll see what happens with that. And then another story here, that police claim that they were gagged by the CPS over the Southport terrorist. The police were gagged from releasing vital information about Axel Ruda Cabana in wake of the Southport murders. Merseyside detectives had wanted to provide details about the killer's background, including his religion, which is Christianity, and his crimes, but were warned not to. They were also keen to explain more about a terrorist document and a batch of ricin, but were advised against it. There's something very odd here.
Yes, and that's all attributed
that's all
to
in the public interest.
Yes, it's all attributed to an unnamed police source saying that there was frustration, they couldn't say more. But that is something that Serena Kennedy, Merseyside's police chief constable, has said that is not the case, and they hadn't done that, and their priority was protecting the families and delivering justice for the victims. So there's clearly a tension there, even within the police, I suspect, where
do they even
some
know the
want
law?
to say more. Well, you would hope so, but there's clearly a tension over what happened at the time, over certain people wanting to say more and other people wanting them to say less, and it's not entirely clear who was who in that. But certainly there's a public safety issue as well, because if there was speculation and fears about ricin, then surely they had a public safty duty.
But that flies in the face of the right for the public to self-protect, doesn't it? I mean, there is that right, and to know that there was ricin, but it has been safely removed, is within the that's a public interest issue, I think. I think that is the definition of the public have a right to know that.
And that may be one of the things that some of the police wanted to get out there, and they were stopped from doing so. So there's clearly tensions within the local police force about what was said and what was able to be said. And I think we haven't heard the end of that. There's a lot.
I hope we haven't heard the end of it, because it just whiffs. It's stinky that the public were lied to.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just an omission of information; there were lies as well. So it's just kind of it doesn't bode well, and the police are not the law.
No,
right?
Exactly. It's not up to.
Not up to them to decide.
They're clearly going to have to tidy up their protocols and guidelines for doing this, because this hasn't worked in the way it should have done on lots of levels. Whether it's the failure to sort of deal with the individual in terms of stopping the murders, right down to the preventing the public order that followed because some of the misinformation around. So there's been a kind of litany of mistakes all the way through.
Huge number of mistakes, which has cost people their liberty.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in prison, aren't there now, over that. Right, that's the Telegraph. Oh, look at the time. We're going to have to take a break. Doesn't it fly?
It does fly.
It does fly. Quick break. Back in a sec.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and very, very good to have your company with me in the studios. Vincent Moss, a former political editor, and we're going through the papers for Wednesday. Now, Labour, this is the Eye, Labour makes new threats to tackle tech moguls over harmful content. The thing that always worries me about this, Vincent, is the idea of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That in order to stop this horrendous content that's out there, it's going to impinge on the freedoms for the rest of us. It's always the balance, isn't it?
It is, although one of the suggestions is just about making it age restrictions on it so that the adults will be able to see all of this content. But there is this idea as well now that perhaps children shouldn't even get smartphones until they're 16. Some people are pushing
some countries are pushing for that, aren't
exactly.
they?
So that would deal with some of this problem. And there are changes going through. Peter Cull, the technology secretary, said that new official digital IDs could be used to stop teenagers accessing certain social media potentially. So
like driver's licences, and
yes,
they're talking about digitalised driver's licence. The only issue I have with that is that I've seen some of these apps and things that can age your face. So, I mean, I don't know, I'm not technical at all, but wouldn't it be possible for a child to just use one of these algorithms to age their face?
Yep, I'm sure they'll find a way around nearly anything that you can put in the way. But
they know more about it than we do, right?
Yeah, and they'll always find a workaround. But there is at least an effort to try and stop children seeing some of this content that radicalises them.
I love it when I'm
on
my television at home and I go on to Channel 4, Channel 5, whatever it says, I am over 18, I am under 18. I go, how difficult is that? I mean, I am over 18, so I'm allowed to watch it. I'm a grown-up girl now.
And even with the 4-digit password, the kids always know their parents' password.
Of course they know how to get around all that. I mean, honestly. But, it just worries me. The overreach from government always concerns me. So we'll have a look at that. The Metro, war on misfits. Starmer warns of new terror threat from bedroom loners plotting extreme violence. I'm not buying that. It's not new. But he does admit chances to stop the child killer leapt off the page, but he denies a cover-up. He's got some questions to answer as well. So that's the Metro for Wednesday. The Daily Express, again, leaning on that story. Britain's new threat from violent online misfits. Terrorism and extreme violence from loners, misfits, young men in their bedrooms. What is interesting is why it is young men and not young women. And people aren't asking that question because a lot of girls now are quite scary. But at least I'm scared of them. Yeah. But, you know, why men? Why young men? What's particular about that?
It's odd, isn't it? It does seem to be almost exclusively young men.
Almost exclusively.
And an interesting figure there in the Daily Express in Wednesday's Daily Express saying that 162 people who referred to the anti-terror prevent scheme, it was about concerns relating to school massacres.
So they've seen it in America and thought that'd be a good thing to do here.
Exactly. And presumably, hopefully, the one reason it hasn't been able to happen here is because we are much more restrictive about guns here. And if there's 162 presumably young teens that are looking at that kind of stuff, then at least a percentage of them will be thinking about doing that. But of course it's very hard for anybody to get a gun in this country, so we are at least in that respect a bit safer than America.
Yeah, but it's still puzzling, the whole idea that young men are so angry and so unhappy. We're not asking that question. We're almost waiting until they do something, but rather than saying what is going wrong here. I mean, the social contract, I think, between children and the country we live in has completely disappeared. I understand why young people are frustrated, they're mental. Why would they bother saving money? They can't afford to buy anything. They're spending half their salary or a third of their salary on rent. What's the point? I can understand that, but to turn that anger, and a lot of this is misogyny. as well.
And that's the role models, isn't it? It's characters like Andrew Tate and people like that who had a huge influence over millions of teenage boys, and that's a big problem as well, because they're his culture and his world outlook seeping into their world outlook, and it's infecting their view of the world.
But I just don't. Why? And I don't know if we're asking that question enough. You know, why is it young men that are turning to this extreme violence? I mean, just awful. And there will be, unfortunately, there will be more. So that's the Daily Express, Daily Star, who are. Thought for the day: is it black bins or green bins flying through the air this week, Doreen? I don't know why that would matter, but lock up your bins, they say, as well as your garden chairs, trampolines, fences, and especially your syrup. Syrup, a fig, wig, in case you were wondering. Now, it is going to get windy.
Yeah, 90 miles an hour. I've already virtually lost a fence in my back garden.
That's expensive.
It is, and very hard to get somebody to come out and fix it. So I better lock down anything else that's left out there. And yes, bins is another thing that goes, isn't it? And I don't have a trampoline, but I do have chairs and a fence.
I really saw you with a trampoline
in the back garden.
Yeah.
Me and my little dog bouncing up and down the
trampoline.
Yes.
Yeah, I really had that image. Oh, you've ruined that for me.
Yeah.
No, anything that you've got that you want to keep hold of, then tie it down. Is it really going to be that bad in our neck of the woods there?
No, well, it tends to be on the coast, doesn't it? But 90 miles an hour, that is strong, isn't it?
That is strong, yeah. So they're advising you to lock up your bins. And then there's a picture of Elon Musk at the top there, a Nazi piece of work, question mark.
Which he denies, of course, that
and
it was a Nazi salute.
And the question mark is there for legal reasons.
Yes, exactly.
But anyway, he denies that he was doing anything but sort of waving.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. The Financial Times: Trump widens economic war to tax. This must be about his tariffs. A pledge of new trade tariffs against US allies confirmed. A threat to double the rate on foreign citizens and businesses. Support for the OECD Pact on Global Levies withdrawn. And the EU suspects influence of tech billionaires on policy. That is really terrifying as well, that you had 4 or 5 of the globe's richest men who probably between them have enough money. They probably own about 50% of the world in terms of money, and they're up front and centre in Trump's new government, and they were right there at the inauguration.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
well, they're the new oligarchy, aren't they? It used to be the railroad barons in years gone by, and perhaps even the media barons at certain times, and now it's the tech barons. I think what will worry British people in America potentially is this threat of doubling the rates on foreign citizens when it comes to tax, and so potentially Brits working over there and business over there could be paying huge tax bills or being forced to leave. So, but at the end of the day, he has promised a huge amount of things. So, quite how many will come off, let's see. But America will have to judge him on what they mainly want over there is more money in their pocket and immigration and inflation tackled, and that's what they'll fundamentally judge him on.
You would have imagined, though, that the tech billionaires who probably rely on foreign brain power, skills for their tech companies, they would be terrified about losing, engineers for Musk in his factories, or, all those brilliant people he may have brought in from other countries who've got these extraordinary skills, and they're going to be double taxed and they're going to leave. And so you would imagine that the tech billionaires would be the ones going, "Oi, Don, calm yourself."
Sure, but won't they say, well, we want special visas for our people are different, so special taxes for our people, it's the others that we don't want. And so, it's not a great time to be an illegal immigrant there, because he is still talking about deporting potentially millions of people. Now, that can't happen. But
1 in 6 workers in America at the moment is an undocumented worker.
Yeah.
And they are, by dint of the fact that they're illegal, are cheaper. And so suddenly you get rid of all your cheap 1 in 6 cheap workers, and you replace them with an American who wants more money, what happens to inflation?
Well, exactly.
And these are the questions that I have, and I don't understand why he doesn't get that.
And it won't happen because Americans, same issue in this country, don't want to be picking oranges and fruit picking and doing those sort of jobs.
Exactly.
So it would destroy their economy if they get rid of that huge migrant workforce. So there's a lot of things that he says that are contradictory. And my favourite are some of the things that are just pure bonkers, like the renaming of the Bay of Mexico, which brought a smile to Hillary Clinton and many other people's faces during the inauguration.
But I mean, also taking back the Panama Canal, and the Panamanians are going, no, you're not.
No, and renaming Canadian Alaskan mountains and taking back and Greenlanders certainly aren't going to sell up anytime soon.
No, they're not. So it is interesting. But the other thing that concerns me about these tech billionaires being so close to Trump is the incredible power they have over information.
Yeah.
And, you know, if he does give police officers, for example, immunity to kill people without prosecution, and that starts to happen, will we get the information when these tech billionaires are the ones controlling that information? It's like the old media giants, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what worries me, I think, as well, seeing the power that those men have that were in the room to suppress information or to twist information on these platforms, the most powerful platforms in the world.
Yeah, and they're all falling in behind him. I mean, we saw Mark Zuckerberg's Meta
Zuckerberg.
Yes, exactly, also supporting him. And it's interesting how often during his press conference and things, Trump has paid tribute to Elon Musk in terms of delivering support for him in the key swing states because of his huge knowledge of demographics and how information and messaging works. So, I mean, he owes an awful lot to Musk in terms of his election victory. And in terms of, as you say, I mean, with the diminishing sort of influence of newspapers and the decline in that market and the concentration of power in the hands of these small number of tech barons, that's really worrying for democracy generally and
it really is.
Asserting and anybody that wants to sort of question Trump's agenda and Trump's policies.
Yes, like many, he's a keen advocate of free speech when they're saying nice things about him.
Isn't everyone who's an advocate of free speech?
Yeah,
yes.
exactly that. Right, Vincent and I have got to take a quick break, but we will be back in a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, good to have your company. With me, keeping me company in the studio is Vincent Moss, former political editor, and we're going through Wednesday's newspapers. I think this is unfair. This is The Sun, and then they've given him the tag, the Amazon killer. I think that's a little unfair on Amazon, don't you?
It is. It's a snappy headline, but they are highlighting the fact that it looks he was able to buy a knife in just seconds. Now, Amazon would doubtless say that they have got an awful lot of safeguards in place.
When I've tried to buy knives, yes, they have. I think so, but then I'm not a murderer, I suppose. No, and
smart people are always going to find workarounds to do these things, but the Sun are very annoyed about the fact that he was able to get equipment very, very quickly, and he sort of Keir Starmer's apparently told The Sun that he will urgently change the law to stop under-18s bypassing online age checks with ease. Keir Starmer says, well, this cannot continue. Well, he's obviously right in that respect, but it's one thing to say these things, but quite how you stop resourceful individuals finding ways around age restrictions is very, very hard.
Well, look, I mean, without wanting to be, Miss Cynical, as you know I'm not, I am, if you can't get hold of a knife on Amazon, you get one out of your kitchen. Knife. It is not about the knife in this instance. It's not about the knife. It's not even about where he got the knife. Because if he hadn't been able to get it there, and some would argue that he shouldn't have been able to get it there, he would still have got a knife because he had violent intentions. He just, he could have got one from his kitchen drawer. Yeah, or bought one from somebody else, or taken one from somebody else. But that's my point, is that it's not... I mean, I don't think there's too much attention being paid. Well, we're going to crack down on people buying knives. Well, what are you going to do? Stop it. There was one Prime Minister, one MP, who did actually come forward with the idea of blunting all knives. So all knives had a rounded edge. All knives, kitchen knives, cutting knives, everything like that. And that was genuinely put forward by an MP.
Well, it's crazy, isn't it? Because then people just find a way of killing people with forks, and we've all seen enough horror movies to know you can still kill people with a fork. So it's not the implement, is it? It's the person who's behind it. And that's what I'm saying here. That I think that the Amazon killer, it is dodging the real reason this monster did what he did, in my personal opinion. Right, the Daily Mail. Reeves hit by biggest job slump since COVID. Of course, she's headed off to the Davos summit amid fresh alarm over faltering economy and warnings from investors of a debt death spiral. That's not easy to say. So it might be chilly there, but it's... she's going to get the cold shoulder, isn't she? Well, yes. The Mail, no fans of the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, but what they're seizing on at the moment is the latest unemployment figures, where there was a small rise in unemployment, because obviously, given the budget where employer national insurance contributions were raised... What did she think was going to happen? Well, exactly. Employers are not hiring people or laying off people ahead of that kicking in, but there's also the sort of fear about, the sort of fragility of the bond markets, and the lack of investment, because that £10 billion of headroom that she had is being wiped out. Yeah, people don't want to buy British debt anymore. Yeah. Not without a massive interest on it, because they're going, well, it's too much of it. So there you go, that's the Daily Mail. The Guardian for Wednesday. PM's pledge to overhaul terror laws amid tidal wave of online violence. He's going to pass the buck to the technology companies. I think that's his idea of doing that. And convicted Capitol rioters are freed by Trump. Extremist supporters of Donald Trump, who attacked the US Capitol on January the 6th, 2021. Isn't this a kind of admission by Trump that they did it for him? Yeah, and I think they're his people. I thought he said that it wasn't anything to do with him, but he's pardoned them, which feels like an admission that they did exactly what he wanted them to do. And some of them convicted of quite violent offences, and yet they're all getting out of jail. Some far-right extremists, but letting out all of them, and some of them guilty of pretty serious offences. But I think pretty much everybody got out. I mean, some of them were accused of helping stockpile firearms at a hotel, that could be ferried across the river to Washington, D.C. So these aren't small sort of, breaching a police cordon.
Yeah, they're not
and things
innocent
like that.
bystanders who got sucked into a bit of name calling. It's 1,500 defendants on Monday were pardoned by Trump. So they're out, and of course that's 1,500 voters for the rest of it.
Yes.
Mind you, he can't be voted in again unless he changes the constitution.
No, well, didn't he say at one point he thought he might be America's last president, whatever that means?
Yeah,
so,
meaning that, he's going to change the constitution so that he can't be got rid of. Mind you, he won't live forever, even Trump.
Well, who knows?
But then he has got an entire family that probably quite fancy a go. The Daily Mirror for Wednesday, total disgrace. He was able to buy a knife on Amazon. I don't think that's the argument. I think they're distracting us with that. Axel Rudakabana was free to buy his Southport murder weapon on Amazon despite admitting having a blade 10 times, Yvette Cooper said. I think they are distracting us with this.
Yeah, well, there's
also
trying
to distract us with this.
Yes, because there's also a mention of Google in the Mirror story, talking about how the terror guide that was found at his home was still available on Google.
Yeah.
So they're very much in the sights of the government in terms of laying, as you say, some of the blame somewhere.
But they are. They're wanting
Google.
to say it wasn't our fault. That was Amazon's fault.
Yeah.
Or that's not our fault. That was Google's fault. That's not our fault. That's their fault. And I think that is cowardly, and I think it's pathetic, because as we've discussed, if he didn't get his knife from Amazon, he would have got it from somewhere.
No.
This monster was intent on violence. This is all a distraction, and it's so they can say, see, we've done something about it. We've told Amazon to tighten up their rules, and we've told Google to get that offline. Aren't we great? That's what they're doing.
And the reality is that
it's
he
pathetic.
was referred to Prevent 3 times, as we said earlier, and he was referred to the authorities so many times. There was ample opportunity to intervene and put him somewhere where he couldn't cause harm to others, and that didn't happen. So that's the fundamental massive failing in the system and the protocols, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. But they've got the excuse, of course, that this happened on the Tories' watch.
Yes.
So they can do that. That's probably why they're having an inquiry. Yeah. And allowing an inquiry to happen, because we know how nervous they are about inquiries. But I just think this is an absolute distraction technique, and they think we're stupid enough to go, oh yeah, no, it's Amazon's fault. It's absolute rubbish.
But it just shows whether it's the prisons or the courts or the prevent system, none of these public services are working in the way they should be working to capture the people they should be capturing. And
they're not, or they're not talking to each other enough. There isn't any cross sort of agreement about keep an eye on this person, or look, he's been referred to us. Then he's been referred to us, so can you keep an eye on him for a bit, or whatever. And the other story, really, that is on most of the papers is Pauline Quirk has revealed that she has dementia. This is, I think she's an MBE, isn't she?
Yes, I think she was the Queen's last honours list. She got an award. But what was incredible is she's apparently had dementia for Birds of a Feather staff for about 3 or 4 years, and her husband revealed that when he made the statement saying that she was stepping back from public life because she does an awful lot for young, aspiring actors and actresses.
She got the Quirk Academy.
Yeah.
It's very sad. It's very sad. We wish her well. Vincent Moss, thank you very much indeed for your company for the last hour, taking us through the newspapers for Wednesday, January the 22nd. Can you believe this month is nearly over? Absolutely. It's outrageous. Oh, really? You've had enough of it already. Thank you. Right, coming up, it's You and Me. It is the only place on this station where there is an hour-long phone-in, so please do take advantage of it and give me a call. We are talking about Prevent. We're talking about this murderer. And we're talking really... I want to know, actually, why are we looking at so many angry young men? Not just angry young men, but violent young men in our society. I think that's the question that we should be answering right now, not about a blade that could be bought from anywhere, being bought from Amazon. That's just a distraction. But what's really going on? And Prevent had the opportunity to do just that 3 times and didn't. So what is the answer to the violence that we're seeing? Give me a call, 0344 499 1000.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, good morning to you. It is Petrie here with you through until 1 o'clock. So we've got a clear hour here and it's all yours. There is nowhere else that does this. Everybody else has got guests and it's packed. But I always make sure that this hour is for your voices, for you to have a chance to talk back. You've been listening all day, really, about the failings of Prevent. They're starting to come out in the newspapers now. The Prevent is the multi-agency thing that is supposed to prevent things like the murder of these little girls, but it didn't. And despite the fact that Axel Rudigbana was referred to Prevent 3 times, nothing was done. And the suspicion is that he didn't fall into the right sort of, I don't know, terrorist, if you like, that he didn't have any religious ideology. Now, I know that's hard to believe, given that he was found with an Al-Qaeda manual, and I'm struggling with that as well. But what we're being told is that he murdered these little girls because he idealized violence and death. It's hard to believe that that was the only motivation, but tragically, because he pled guilty, we perhaps will never know the actual motivation for these killings. Now, he had that manual, and it is believed that he downloaded it twice, but it is believed he downloaded it in order to learn from this manual how to make ricin, which, as we know, is incredibly toxic, killing poison. Once used, I think, on the Japanese underground service, if you remember. So this again leads me to believe that he had other plans in mind, although I don't think he thought he was going to walk out of the dance studio alive, or at least in order to carry out another attack. But he nonetheless, he murdered those little girls. He did, and he pled guilty to those. Now, we're being told that it is not a terror attack. The attack wasn't terrorism. There's no evidence that he subscribed to any political or religious ideology. His only purpose was to kill. He targeted the youngest and most vulnerable, no doubt, to spread the greatest level of fear and outrage. But he also targeted girls, specifically girls, and I can't help but think that that has something to do with it. And maybe we need to redefine what a terrorist is. Why does it have to be about a political ideology? Why does it have to be about a religious ideology? You know, I mean, we know that the far right, perhaps, if they wanted to carry out something, that would be a political ideology, right? So that would be described as terrorism. But I'm really quite confused. This jihadi manual being discovered, why they think there wasn't any ideology involved here, and but they say not. And he pled guilty to murder and to the terror charge of holding this manual and having ricin. But the killings were not deemed to be an act of terrorism, and maybe that's why Prevent didn't prevent anything, because they spoke to him. He's from a Christian family, and he didn't appear to have any sort of political motivation or any religious motivation for his very violent behaviour, which was known. I mean, he was known as being violent. He was violent at school. He took a hockey stick to somebody. He threatened to go and to massacre people at the school. And I wonder if our definition of terrorism does need to be redefined because of this. But also, I'm most concerned. A couple of things are concerning me. One is this government trying to distract you by saying he bought the knife on Amazon. He downloaded that from Google. it's their fault, we can do something about that, when actually it has nothing to do with it. It's nothing to do with it. OK, he shouldn't have been able to buy a knife on Amazon. I completely agree with that. I've heard from somebody today who said, look, I'm an Amazon delivery driver. I'm not allowed to hand over something that's got a knife in it to somebody who's obviously not over the age of 21. I need to see ID, etc., etc. So he somehow circumvented that. But even so, he could have got the knife from anywhere. We know that, right? We're not dumb. We're not stupid. Yvette Cooper thinks we are, and Keir Starmer thinks we are, but we're not. And downloading a jihadi manual, yeah, you shouldn't be able to do that. It was highly redacted, apparently, not enough. But you shouldn't be able to. But you know, that's not the problem here. I think the problem here is why there are so many young men, particularly young men, who have this violent attitude, this violence in them. What is happening in the world? We're talking about men here, not women. And you could argue, well, women, I think there are a lot of violent women around, right? There's a lot of very nasty women around. But Britain is facing new terror threat from a generation of young men in their bedrooms. That's what they should be dealing with, not the internet, not Amazon, not where he got the knife from. He might have found one on the side of the road. Who cares? The fact is that he carried out an extremely violent act against little girls. And that means something. His choice of victim means something. And Keir Starmer, even in his, whatever he did today, his statement today, saying children, he didn't talk about them being girls. And I do think that that is specific enough to have been noted by our Prime Minister. So the real problem here is not where he got the knife. It's not, well, I suppose it is to a degree not preventing him. But the biggest issue here that the government need to deal with, because it's far too difficult, they're not going to, is why we're facing a new terror threat from a generation of young men in their bedrooms. Now, I don't think this is a new terror threat. This has been going on for a very, very, very long time. Particularly, you know, young men radicalising themselves with bogus clips from the Quran that you can't just read in isolation. The Quran has to be read with lots of papers and lots of other things in order for it to make sense. And a fully qualified imam who's read it from cover to cover, which takes years to do with all the papers that are attached to it, would be able to say to one of these young men, if they were heading that way, look, that's not what this actually means. But they're being radicalised in terms of Islam in their bedrooms. They're being radicalised in terms of being an incel, hating women by all the misogynistic material that's out there against women. And they're being radicalised to the far right with a load of nonsense online as well. The common denominator here is young men being radicalised, being turned into violent machines, into monsters. Why? How? Literally, I think that is the question. And it's not the question that's being asked while they're pointing the finger at everybody else and saying, look over there, let's blame Amazon. One of the papers, The Sun, saying the Amazon killer. I think that's really deeply unfair. I mean, how is it Amazon's fault? If it hadn't been Amazon, it would have been a shop round the corner or his own kitchen drawer. I mean, that's a distraction technique, and not a very subtle one either. But what is causing this? Why is this happening? And why the rise in misogyny? Do you have any answers to any of that? I hope you do. I don't. 0344 499 1000. Calls are charged at the national rate, and you can send me a message to put the word talk and your message to 87222. Do we need to redefine what terrorism is? This looks like terrorism, it feels like terrorism, but he's been found guilty of, or pled guilty to murder. which is different. Right, let's take a call from Linda. Please give me a call. I'd love to hear your views on this because I'm really quite upset and confused by it all. Linda, good morning.
Good morning, Petrie.
Good morning. I mean, look, we're going to get some details about this, but not, I don't think, the most important one, which is why.
But sometimes we don't know why, unless there can be an obvious motive found, or unless he tells us, we may never know why, and I think that's the difficult thing. But I think that it's interesting because I often think that we have this quite a lot in America with school shootings, because not always, but almost always, they're young men who usually attend or have recently attended the school. And almost always after we hear they were loners, they were a bit weird, they spent all their time in their bedrooms. And I just think that we're now having this here, and we have had this before. The guy that shot the people in Plymouth, and again, it wasn't deemed terrorist because there was no obvious political or religious ideology, but he was angry at women.
Yeah.
But the problem that we've got is, I remember, well, not that long ago, we've been talking about having, specific, hate crimes in relation to misogyny. And there was even at one point, not that long ago, I don't remember the details, but a suggestion that maybe we should add misogyny in as part of terrorism. And even on this very radio station, there were people, presenters and callers, laughing at it, saying, oh, well, I'm going to get called a terrorist if I say a girl looks pretty. But maybe we need to look at this.
Because that isn't a terrorist act. Yeah, a terrorist act is deliberately going and killing little girls.
Exactly.
And that's why I think we should know what the motivation was. He won't ever tell us. But clearly, he deliberately targeted girls. The Ariana Grande bombing, that was girls. There is something going on here that, whether it be religious, whether it be whatever other reason, that there is misogyny here. And we do know that there are religions in this country that are deeply misogynistic. I'm not going to lie about that. But it's not religiously based, it's misogyny based.
Absolutely. And I think that the rise of people like Andrew Tate, you saying, why is it so prevalent now? I think it's so prevalent because we've got the internet. Because before, you'd always have sad loners that would sit in their room and possibly fantasize about doing all sorts of awful things. But they didn't have the validation of other online people, of communities. There's now whole communities online, and I think that, as a woman who is quite, and I'm sure, you've probably had very similar, who's quite active on social media, I do say my point of view. I'm always getting called stupid names, or, a man could make a very similar point, but it's the women that they go after.
Completely right. And all I get, if ever anybody's, I just post pictures of my dog now. I can't be bothered with the anger. I really can't, because the times that I have said anything, I get messages like, "Well, you should be raped."
Yes, I've had
raped.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you? What? I'm sorry. You think I should be raped?
Yeah.
For making that political suggestion? Rape?
Well,
what is wrong with you?
Absolutely. And look at the number of, female politicians. When they did a survey, wasn't it something like nearly half had a rape threat?
I think it's more than that, yeah. You've just got to be a woman with even without a profile, with a voice, a woman with a voice, and rape is the first go-to threat. Rape.
Absolutely. And I think that, I don't know whether this needs to be part of the terror legislation, because another caveat that a lot of people haven't considered, and I'm not sure, I don't necessarily have an opinion on this as such, but just that terror legislation means that people's rights can be taken away without trial, without legal representation. So we do have to be a little bit careful how far we redefine this. That's just my thinking.
But the definition for me for terrorism is to create terror.
But by that logic, is any violent crime then terrorist because it causes terror? I've battled this in my brain.
It is difficult.
It's really hard.
Yeah, but he planned this. I don't know. I suppose it is quite difficult, but a lot of people are saying to me, look, he was a terrorist, he was a terrorist, he was a terrorist, he was a terrorist. And the thing is that that's not, he pled guilty to the terrorism offence of having that manual and the ricin.
I'm just going to throw it out here, but why are we... I don't really know how I feel about this, and it's just a thought that's cropped into my head. But why are we so obsessed about whether it was terrorist or not? Surely we need to know why he did this, I agree, but that he gets a life sentence and never walks the street again. Why are we so caught up on the fact it has to be terrorist?
Interesting.
I don't know the answer. I've got no...
No, that's a very good question, because we are hung up on that.
Yeah.
And maybe it is because of the colour of his skin.
Yeah.
Maybe it is because of that manual that he had, the jihadi manual. I can understand that as well. Maybe it's because he had the ricin. But you are right. I mean, the point of this is that this was a murderer who murdered the 3 little girls. He's a serial killer.
We didn't demand that Raoul Moat was or Derek Bird or Thomas Hamilton. We didn't demand, or the guy that did the Hungerford shootings. We didn't demand that they were classed as terrorists. And I'm just wondering why. Is it because they were adults, other than Madame Blaine, that they killed? I don't know. I'm literally just thinking off the top of my head.
Linda, I think that's an extremely interesting question, actually. And it's now you've got me thinking as well now why it is
hard.
Yeah, we're so hung up on this being a terrorist incident, and you know, maybe it makes us feel in an odd way better that this was a terrorist, not just a normal, not normal, there's nothing normal about him, not just some bloke that killed little girls. He was a terrorist. That's very specific.
And of course, because then it can't be your kid in the bedroom, can it either?
Exactly.
It can't be your loner kid.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And again, I'm struggling. I've listened to you all evening sort of talk about it, and I've kind of, a bit like you, kind of keep flip-flopping. Ultimately, this is horrific. Ultimately, he deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison.
He won't,
never be released. I hope he will.
He won't.
And
because he was 17 when he carried it out.
I Googled this, I've checked this out, and actually for murder, under 21-year-olds can be sentenced to life imprisonment in exceptional circumstances.
But he can't be given a whole life tariff.
Okay, so what does that mean then? What's the maximum he can get, do you know?
That would depend on the judge, and if he serves it consecutively or concurrently. But it would also depend on there will be a parole date set.
Oh, Petrie, the whole thing's just horrific, and I still remember that day and the bit when they released the information about, they were sat making friendship bracelets. I've run classes like that, and your head just fills with all sorts.
It's just the most awful, heinous thing, and maybe that's why people do want it defined as terrorism. Again, is to say this was so bad we can't just call it murder. This was so awful we can't just leave it there. But Linda, why is it young men? What is it about young men?
I don't know. I mean, obviously I've heard the people, I've spoken to my husband about this quite a bit. And obviously he's not a young man, but he thinks that maybe there could be an element of men don't know their sort of, not place anymore, but kind of, he's 54, and he said when he was young, boys don't cry, a man provides for his family, a man is strong. Now, whether those were right things to say to young men back then or not, I don't know. But now they're being told, well, actually, you also need to be sensitive, but then they're also being told, but you also need to be brave, and you also need to be a protector. So maybe we're just confusing the message. I don't know.
It is certainly the root of it, isn't it? It's absolutely the root of it. Linda, as ever, very thought-provoking call. Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's certainly got my brain whirring. Thank you very much indeed. Linda there in London. So, interesting. Why are we so hung up about this being described as a terrorist incident? I think that's a really good question. Give me a call, 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, and a very good morning to you. We are discussing the not so much Axel Rudikabana. We are talking about him, but we're waiting for sentencing before I really unleash the beast in talking about him. But we are talking about prevent and or non-prevent, as it would appear to be. Now, I happen to know that prevent were very concerned some years ago at being called racist because they were going after mostly the threat of Islamic terrorism, right? So they decided instead to go to be more open and start looking at the far right, which is right. I mean, they should look at all forms of terrorism. They should be looking at the incels now, who are so misogynistic that they plan to kill women and girls. Then you've got, you know, Islamic terrorism, which we know is still prevalent. People are being convinced that the form of jihad, the violent jihad they're talking about, is the only way to go. We know that. And then you've got the far right. So just go after all of them, right? But they were very concerned with being described as being Islamophobic. And when you look at the numbers, I'm afraid the facts speak for themselves, that 8 out of 10 of these terrorists, if you like, have been of Islamic persuasion, or even potential terrorists as well, things that have been stopped. So you can't ignore the facts just to appear to be, you know, open-minded. You can't. And it's the same, we saw this again with the rape gangs, is that's how they got away with it for so long, because the police forces were so concerned with being seen as racist, or the council was being seen as racist. So we've got ourselves into a right old pickle here. And actually, the very good, peace-loving Muslims in this country who just want to live their lives, they're against this as well. Of course they are. They don't want to see anybody get hurt by somebody. But this monster is not being described as a terrorist. Now, he has admitted to some terrorism acts, but the killing of these little girls is not considered a terrorist act. And Linda just asked a really interesting question there. Why do we want it to be terrorism so much? Why are we so hung up on this being a terrorist act? And I wonder if it's because it's just so heinous what he did that we can't imagine that just being a want to kill, right? That there had to be some other evil behind this, that there had to be some pushing of this monster to behave in that way, that somehow that makes it easier to digest that he wasn't just a killer. I mean, the outcome is the same, but do we need there to have been something else, to have carried out something so unthinkably awful, somehow to explain it, that this was something else as well? This wasn't just a young man in his room being angry. This was somebody who was driven to kill these little girls by something exceptionally evil. And maybe that's why we are so determined that this should be seen as a terrorist act. I don't know. I am merely just throwing it out there. I've got loads of messages coming in. I don't want to read some because I don't want you to feel neglected. But Angie has said 2 things regarding the inquiry Starmer announced. First, it'll end up curtailing more of our rights, a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. I'm afraid I do agree with that. And second of all, the establishment's marking their own homework as must do better and learn lessons. We've heard it all before, haven't we? We've literally heard it all before. Jay from Leeds. Hello, Jay. I'm 21. The inquiry is just another waste of money. Labour is absolutely culpable and the Tories are culpable too. Why no one is questioning James Cleverly and Suella Braverman too is totally beyond me. They were both Home Secretaries when he was referred. Social media is the downfall of the nation. There is too much finger pointing and not enough action and accountability. Rudy Gabana was referred to Prevent 3 times during the incompetence and indifference of the Conservatives. They did nothing. They are all incompetent. No one is working for the people. They're all just working to line their pockets and placate the masses. Jay, thank you for that excellent message there. And she goes on to say some lovely things. Thank you, Jay. And also, hello, Jay's grandma. Hello. I understand you've got a smart TV, so you could watch me. Hello. So, Jay, thank you very much indeed for that. You must tell me your grandma's name so I can give her a proper shout out. Ernie has said, hi, Petrie, how many young men have committed terrorist acts in this country? Is it really that many? Well, I mean, we don't know how many have been prevented, but also that's not me saying it. It's the Prime Minister saying that we have a new terror threat from a generation of young men in their bedrooms. But those people who do commit terrorist acts tend to be men and tend to be of a younger age. So I haven't got the numbers in front of me. I didn't research that bit. This one from Sam in Fife says, it's got nothing to do with being radicalised. You are either bad, good or evil. He is evil and he knew full well what he was doing. The country is far too soft. It's as simple as that. You only have to listen to the leaders these days. They, like Starmer, are pathetic. It's disgusting the language that some men use is awful, I agree. Good men always want to protect women and not harm them. And thank goodness there are way more good men than bad, and you know, I think men are brilliant. I really do, as a whole. But those that are these evil. But I wonder, Sam, if that's why we need this to be an act of terrorism, because it's driven by something more than just a horrible, evil person. That's driven by some corrupted ideology. I wonder if that makes us feel that it is less likely to happen than just some rando, angry young man with a knife. Maybe that's just too awful for us to consider. I wonder if that's it. I don't know. I wish I knew the answer to the questions that I ask you, but I don't, and that's why I rely on you to give me a call. Jack, hello. Jack says, how are you? Hope all's well. It is. The shifting landscape of terrorism highlighted by Prime Minister Keir Starmer after the Southport attack demands urgent attention. Axel Rudegabana's 3 references to counter extremism emphasises a critical reality that we're facing a new and serious threat. It's utterly unacceptable that the Prevent scheme, designed as a safeguard, has been criticised for its ineffectiveness and failure to deliver real results. This is not just a bureaucratic issue. Lives are at stake. We need a comprehensive and effective approach to combat these threats, not empty promises and ineffective programmes. And that's from Jack in Eccles. Yeah, yes, I do think that there is potentially a shifting landscape, but this has been around for a long time. And to call it new, I think, is again a distraction technique. This is so new. We couldn't possibly have planned for this. Well, we didn't know about it. It's all the Tories. We didn't know. It's new, and it just feels like again an excuse. And the whole idea that this is because of Amazon selling a knife or Google allowing a download is just palpably ridiculous. It is absolute distraction. It's pointing over there. It's their fault. We're going to do something about it. We're going to make Amazon tighten up their rules, and we're going to stop Google from downloading that. There you go, problem solved. That's what they're trying to do to you. That's what Yvette Cooper's trying to do to you, and that's what Keir Starmer's trying to do to you, because they won't tackle the root causes of this. They just haven't got to do so. Give me a call, 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, good morning to you. It is Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock, and we were just commenting there in the break. The quality of the text messages this morning is absolutely right up there. They're brilliant. Thank you. I really, really appreciate them. Quality of the calls, I don't know. We've got Robert now. Hello, Robert.
Hi, I didn't think I'd be talking to you so quick. You could have given me an heads up last night and let me know that you was going to be talking about
this is the before sentencing talk about it. There will be another chat. Okay. This is more about prevent and what's actually going on here, as opposed to him being the scumbag monster that he is.
Okay, well, there's something that was... I think that the press, if it would have been 3 little black girls being murdered, and it would have been a white perpetrator, it would have been spun completely different. It would have been race hate. Now, you've mentioned every single thing and people, what the causes was, but not one person has said it could have been race hate. And that is the difference. People were frightened and they won't call, I think a lot of it's woke. And it's the same as knife crime in London. People won't say 99% of knife crime is black on black, but they're frightened to say it. It's the truth.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do get a bit annoyed when politicians try to literally whitewash everything and not mention, because it does matter. These things are significant. You know, what is going on in the black community where these young men, and it is largely young men, as they grow up, they tend to grow out of knife crime. You know, what is it about them that is missing in society, that this is happening? Because whether we like it or not, you know, it does take a village to raise a child, and we are not doing that anymore. And there is a situation where these young men, these largely young men, there is something going on. But it is easier to blame Amazon than it is to blame ourselves, or to blame the parents, or to blame society for what's happening.
Well, it's social. I mean, the social media is the root of all evil, as far as I'm concerned. It is the Antichrist. I've always said that. I've said it before, that social media is the devil in disguise. You know, if it's used badly, obviously it's used. If it's used well, I mean, you know, you rely on social media, but it can be used for the wrong things as well.
No, it can, and what it does do, I think it was Linda that said it, it gives people validation for their sick, twisted minds, because they'll find somebody else who's just as sick and twisted out there who goes, no, mate, you're right. You know, I think that as well. And it validates them, and it gives them that sort of power, if you like. And that is the sin, that is the criminality here. But I don't know how you stop that without stopping all the good stuff as well.
Well, I mean, everybody's a phone zombie. I mean, my granddaughter's come around to visit us for the weekend, and I think I'll get a hello and a goodbye off of them after 2 days, because their noses are in their phones. How many times you bump into people in the street? I mean, I don't know. Are you a phone zombie, Petrie?
No, I'm not. My phone is on silent all the time. My friends will tell you that.
Are your children phone zombies?
No. Well, my boy is 27, so he didn't really grow up with phones in the same way. He missed that. So he's not really. He's like me.
But it's like The Walking Dead, isn't it, when you walk down the street? You know what I mean? You walk down Oxford Street, it's like everybody's like a zombie. I think it's got a lot to answer for, and I think that's the answer to your question, how these people are being rationalised.
Radicalised, yeah.
Do you know what? I don't know what's the matter with the youth of today. Why don't they just smoke some dope and watch some porn?
Well, we don't advise that, because it is still an illegal act. No, I do know what you mean. Listen, I just think that you're right, but there is a drive to call this terrorism, and I think if it had been if it had been, as you mentioned, 3 black girls murdered by a white man, I don't know whether people would be rushing to call that terrorism. And that's the interesting question.
They wouldn't have called it race hate either, would they? Well, they would have.
Well, they would have called it race hate. Yeah, they would have done. Absolutely, they would have done.
I think what it is as well is that it's just biting itself up the bum now. But people have been frightened of upsetting the Muslim community. And let's face it, most of the terrorism in this country has been instigated by, by Islam.
Extremists. Look.
Extremists.
But also the Muslim community know that, and they're sick of it too. They don't want it either. They don't want this because it makes their lives really difficult. The peace-loving people who follow Islam in this country, and they don't want it either. They're sick of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, but there's not enough coming out to condone it, though, is there?
No, but that's a bogus argument. That's a bogus argument. When a white guy does something, I don't go out and say, "Oh, so that's nothing to do with me." That's nothing to do with me,
fair enough.
Right?
No, that's fair enough.
Why do we demand that they do it? It's nothing to do with them. So what? Somebody's saying they're a Muslim. They're not proper Muslims because they haven't read the Quran properly. They haven't got a clue what they're doing, and they go out with this jihadi hatred, and it's got nothing to do with the other guy, has it? So I think that's a bogus argument. We expect them to come out.
No, you're right, and I'll take that back as it happens. But when you've got people like Chowdhury and Hamza, it took us years and years to get him out of the country.
Hamza, yeah. I mean, I agree, but that. Look, and I've had a run-in with Chowdhury myself, a vile little scumbag of a creature, horrible little man. I had a very nasty run-in with him actually, but because they're sick. They're sick and twisted. There's sick and twisted.
And dangerous. You left the word out there. Very dangerous.
Yeah, they're sick and twisted and dangerous. But there are fundamental Christians in America who are just as sick and twisted and dangerous, right? Who do things in the name of their fundamental Christianity. Going and they're disgusting people. But there's always those people. But I think the concern is that we can't dodge the facts. And while I'm happy to accept the fact that a lot of knife crime is committed by young black men against young black men, it's not all of that crime, but that is an issue and that is a fact. When you look at the grooming gangs, the ones that are going through court now or have been through court, they are largely Asian grooming. You can't dodge the truth, and this is what's happening, is we're being silenced into pointing out the obvious. And the Pakistani community don't want these scumbags in their community either.
Well, you've not got it needs politicians to actually stand up and say that, and they won't do it because they're frightened to do it, frightened to lose the votes. That's the reason that the grooming gangs were allowed to get away with things with local councils.
That's exactly why they got away with it.
Up north, how many councillors are Asian or are Pakistani? There's a great deal of them. So if we're holding the councils responsible for the grooming gangs getting away with it, we've got to look at that. I mean, a lot of mayors are Asian. I'm not saying they.
No, and there's no suggestion that these are any way, in cahoots. If you're a good person, if you're a good mayor, and you happen to be an Asian nice person, it might be difficult to imagine that a horrible, person is doing those things, and I think that's part of why we need to label this murderer a terrorist, because it makes it feel better in a way.
Why can't you? You could go out tomorrow and stab 10 people on the tube, and so could I. Right? You will never, ever, ever stop that. You will never, ever stop it. But you might stop the motivation behind it and allow the government and the police to act quicker. This is you'll never stop it.
No, I mean, like I said, the whole idea, and we're going to hear this from Starmer and Cooper, it's Amazon's fault, it's Google's fault. Don't even listen to that. It's a bogus argument.
That's rubbish.
We all know that he could have got a knife from anywhere. Blaming Amazon is not the answer to this. It is not the problem. But yeah, listen.
You can do as much damage with a screwdriver,
Thank you. Or a hammer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you've got that motivation, and you want to hurt people, you're going to hurt people. It's nothing to do with buying a knife or downloading a manual. So I'm totally with you on that. Robert, good to talk to you again. Olivia has messaged saying, sorry to message you, never have to apologise, your messages are brilliant. Why isn't anyone talking about the boy's father and history and how our PM, who's supposed to keep us safe, let them in knowing what they've done in the past? Also, he planned an attack a week before at his own school. Planning is terrorism, isn't it? Not necessarily. Yes, he did plan that, and there was some... Yeah, there's quite a complicated history, actually, to Axel Rudikabana's family. They escaped Rwanda, didn't they, after the genocide there. Anyway, that it's very complicated, but it's still, that father perhaps should have been a better father, who knows. I've got to take a break. I will be back in a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi, good morning. It is Petrie here with you, and we're discussing Prevent and what it is that this monster went and killed those 3 little girls. You've got to bear in mind that the sentencing is, it's not tomorrow, is it? It's Thursday. Thursday sentencing. But everybody's been talking about Prevent today. So earlier on in the programme we had a run through what Prevent was supposed to do, what it's supposed to prevent, and clearly hasn't on this occasion. And the fact that he didn't fit into their definition of a terrorist, and perhaps that they should have done, really. Oliver says, the reason that acts of terror or acts of serious evil are growing is because of growing what I call isolation in society, isolationism in society. When social contract goes more and more online from face to face, you lose all sense of perspective of what it's like to lose that human life. Once someone becomes a notification rather than a human, people become desensitized from what it's like to commit evil. It's a very good point. I like that a lot. Debbie then says there's little mention of the Southport killer being autistic. Now, his autism, of course, is in no way any excuse for the horrific murders he committed. But this was a young man who was failed over and over, and his family. He would have been extremely susceptible and vulnerable to online brainwashing, radicalisation, and fixations would have driven him. It is not as clear-cut as to just call him evil. He did lack the capacity that a neurotypical person would. It's astonishing to me how he slipped through the net over and over, and surely he should not go to a regular prison. He wasn't deemed suitable for regular schools. So you think he should go to a mental institution? Well, autism Yeah. I mean, there's so many people with autism, aren't there? And as you rightly point out, it's not a reason for them to go and murder. So I think he probably should be in a standard prison, frankly. The worst one we've got, if it's possible. Maxine says, I think the label terrorism needs to be applied, if true, because it could be possible that others may follow to repeat this absolutely horrendous crime in the name of whatever hideous things they may believe. If he was a lone person with crazed ideologies, then we can perhaps think it's one deranged, evil person acting alone. Whatever the outcome, I feel we do need to know. And that's from Maxine. I agree. And I don't think we ever will know the motivation. That's the problem. Maureen simply says anything to do with men against women is sexual. They've been indoctrinated to believe that the prime purpose of a female is for their sexual gratification. They hate women that they can't have. She doesn't mean all men, she means these men. So, yeah, I don't know. Andrew from Salisbury says prevent is utterly useless and it's a scapegoat for bad parents. What far-right terrorism? A decent immigration service and a good justice system would be a start. And also, like they've just stated, it started in America, is to prosecute the parents. I've done that phone in a couple of times actually, whether we should hold the parents responsible for their children's actions, and I sort of think we should. I do. I've come round to thinking that is possibly going to get parents maybe to pay more attention. I don't know, check under the bed, check you haven't got somebody hasn't got a knife and rice in under their bed. I mean, well, how can that be a thing? Anyway, Debbie is in Essex. Good morning, Debbie.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much.
Good.
First time on talkTV.
Oh, well, welcome.
Thank you very much.
I'm very glad you called, Debbie. It's so nice to get new voices on here. So, Debbie, what made you want to call this morning particularly?
If I'm honest, there are so many different issues going on within, literally all over the place. The fact that you've just brought up the autism issue, I actually have a 4.5-year-old, very autistic, non-verbal granddaughter.
Right.
And trying to get any form of help from social services and beyond. Again, I have been down so many lines over the past 4.5 years, maybe longer. And there is just not the help that we need for these poor children. But yet, anyone else can come wandering into the country and claim all of these free issues that they need, free doctors, free dentists, free healthcare. My poor granddaughter is getting nothing.
And what is it you think she needs?
She needs to be she's in a pretty decent school at the moment, but she needs so much more assessment from from a health issue and more so mental issues. And because the fact that she's non-verbal makes the whole situation so much more difficult. But again, the help, and my daughter has tried so hard to try and get the help, so have I, but it's just not there. And there's continuous things on we're going to give you help, special care staff, we'll help you with this and we'll help you with that. I mean, he's got more chance of building up a little Lego building of something that is going to, do something in the long run, and then it will just all destruct at the end.
But are you concerned that for example, this man, this Axel Rudicabana, that he in some way has been let down by not having the correct support, and maybe that's what drove him to go online or to start to radicalise himself or to start looking at these violent images, because if there is a sense that somebody with a particular type of autism can fixate, then he should have been helped more. And it could have prevented this.
I'm not going to say it would have prevented it, and maybe there could be more help down the line. 100%, I'm not going to say that it could have prevented it, because each individual person is different, and their needs, regardless of what the disability, their needs are going to be different.
Yeah.
So I don't know if him having more mental health help would have made a difference. Again, what he's done was horrific. But again, for my 4.5-year grand-year-old daughter, the help that she so desperately needs now, and again, my daughter's not in a position, she's, just literally barely getting through life. But getting the help for her daughter is...
But she's been assessed, right? And
she's been assessed. She's in a little school that's very close by to where she is. But my daughter's going to end up being evicted in the next few months. Not by her own choice, because of a partner. But for my granddaughter to be able to stay within that area and stay within that school, which is helping her, my daughter has now got to find somewhere else to live within the area, and at the minute there is not a scrap of help out there to help her do that.
And the council's not forthcoming?
The council not helping.
Local MP?
Local MP's not helping. Universal Studios, I do apologise.
That's all right, you mean Universal Credit?
Well, yeah, that's all which we were at Universal Studios, to be fair.
But
Universal Credit, all of the people that you should and are told to go to for help, even Citizens Advice, again, because I've tried myself, because she lives in a different area to me, so I have definitely tried to find out the information, but it just isn't there. And you get given a number and you do it, and then you pass on to another number, and you go round in a big circle, but literally end up going, it's almost like you're in a hamster wheel.
Yeah, and I think, Debbie,
a very not actually getting anywhere.
A very important point is, I think, the lack of services, particularly with mental health and mental health support. And maybe that's as well why we're seeing largely young men turn to other means of quietening their minds or something else to think about, and fixating on violence maybe, or misogyny or whatever. Because if it is young, I'm just troubled that it's young men, because young women will go through a similar thing, but they don't appear to be the ones that are getting self-radicalising or I suppose we don't know. But there's just so many questions with this for me. The why is it that we're suddenly now looking at young men of a particular type? Maybe it is mental health issues, maybe it is. Maybe Rudy Cabana's autism had something to do with his fixating on violence or whatever. Maybe there wasn't enough support there. These are the big questions, and these are the big things that government needs to deal with, but instead they're going to have a go at Amazon and have a go at Google. Malcolm has said, I do not care about the definition of terrorism as long as